Chapter 42-52. Then, the heaven-swallowing beast turned to Xiao Hua and said, "Little guy, don't be afraid. I'm here. Whatever you want to do next, just do it according to your own thought. Senior, please wait a moment." Xiao Hua successfully caused the confrontation between the two beasts. After bowing to the heaven-swallowing beast, he flashed into the pagoda and carefully released his Buddhist sense to explore. Unfortunately, it was as the heaven-swallowing beast said. There was nothing in the pagoda. Xiao Hua flew out of the pagoda and entered another space. He also started from the beginning of the pagoda until he reached the bottom of the pagoda. Deity looked at Xiao Hua coldly and did not speak. The heaven-swallowing beast looked at Deity coldly, guarding against Deiting's sudden attack. The heaven-swallowing beast was like a bullied little wife. It kept a distance from the two beasts and carefully accompanied them. Xiao Hua walked out of the pagoda and used his Buddhist sense to look into the distance. Then, he patted his forehead and opened his delirium eyes. A moment later, Xiao Hua flew back to the inverted space and also released his Buddhist sense to look into the distance. Deity sensed Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense and the Buddhist light on its body moved slightly. The heaven-swallowing beast sneered. Deity glanced at the heaven-swallowing beast and concealed the killing intent in its heart. It sneered and said, "I want to see what you can find." Xiao Hua did not speak. He stood on the ground and opened his delirium eyes again. When he saw everything in front of him, he was stunned. Because the pagoda in the previous space did not have a specific outline, he could only see the occasional Buddhist light. However, the pagoda in the inverted space was indeed a real pagoda. Exquisite tower of great derivation? Damn it, how can there be two of them? Xiao Hua was shocked and hastily flew up again to look up. After a few more glances, Xiao Hua's shock gradually disappeared. This was because the appearance of this pagoda was exactly the same as the exquisite tower of great derivation. However, there were some differences in the delirium breaker eye. In the eyes of Xiao Hua and the others, they were unable to distinguish these differences in a hurry. This pagoda also had 9 levels. At the top of the pagoda, there was the sun and moon, overflowing with the light of the sky. At the base of the pagoda, there were mountains and rivers, revealing the great virtue of the earth. And at the eaves of the 9 levels of the pagoda, there were clouds and jade, showing infinite brilliance. No. Xiao Hua finished looking at the pagoda and frowned. This doesn't seem to be a pagoda. It's not my Dao sect's Dharma artifact either. Instead, it was the imperial artifact of a Confucian cultivator. How could there be a imperial equipment here? Could it be that other than the dragon god, the Maitreya Buddha, and the Buddha Lord, there was someone else here? Or perhaps, this Xiao's guess is correct. Little thing. The Harken sneered, "What did you see with your third eye?" Xiao Hua closed his delirium eyes and pointed at the pagoda. "There is another pagoda inside this pagoda. Everything we saw was an illusion. How is this possible?" The Harken was shocked. It twitched its ears in disbelief, but the expression on its face did not change much. The heaven-devouring beast naturally released its primordial perception as well, and even opened its mouth to release waves towards the Buddhist pagoda. However, the two beasts, without exception, showed a puzzled expression. Obviously, they didn't find anything unusual. Seniors. Xiao Hua opened his mouth. "There's no need to look anymore. The pagoda in that layer is fused with the pagoda in the outer layer. Only, if we break the pagoda in the outer layer, we might be able to see the pagoda in the inner layer. Who dares?" The Harken originally wanted to drive Xiao Hua and the heaven-devouring beast out of the skyward tower. How could it allow them to break the pagoda now? The Harken roared, and the Buddhist light around its body soared into the sky. Its voice shook Xiao Hua's mind until it was buzzing with pain, like the legendary Buddhist lion roar. "Of course I dare." The heaven-devouring beast was even more unaffected by the Harken's words. Its body trembled, and the pitch-black demonic cloud appeared again, and its body expanded several times. The Harken was not surprised by the heaven-devouring beast's attitude. He only looked at Xiao Hua coldly. Xiao Hua's body turned cold. The Harken's fierce gaze was like a flying sword that wanted to pierce through him. Xiao Hua sneered. At this point, Did he still have the chance to retreat? Even if the nameless pagoda was the dragon god or the Buddha lord, for his own survival, for the billions of lives in the Chaos Continent, Xiao Hua would definitely give up his life. I dare to. Xiao Hua straightened his body and took a step forward. His voice was not loud, but the unquestionable tone was more real than gold and stone. Damn it! The Harken cursed angrily. Its entire body suddenly expanded, and its aura completely changed. It was no different from when it was in front of the heaven-connecting peak. Buddhist lotuses appeared in the surrounding space, and each of them contained terrifying negative karma. In the center of these Buddhist lotuses, wisps of blood-red light resembled stamens, tainted with incomparable desolation amidst the benevolence. The heaven-devouring beast roared at the sky and swung its huge head in midair. Buzz! Tens of thousands of black gas immediately flew out from the demonic cloud phantom that soared into the sky. When the black gas landed in the air, it immediately transformed into small heaven-devouring beasts. Each heaven-devouring beast emitted a strange fluctuation from its mouth as it pounced towards the Buddhist lotuses within the Buddhist light. The moment these fluctuations landed in the air, they immediately produced spiral-like spatial ripples that enveloped the Buddhist lotuses. The Buddhist lotuses spun as though they were about to be annihilated by the spatial ripples. However, wherever the Buddhist light around the Harken flickered, endless heavenly flowers fell from the void. Not only did the heavenly flowers disperse the void ripples created by the heaven-devouring beast, but they also made the Buddhist lotus's rotation as stable as a boulder. Truth Listener and the heaven-devouring beast were evenly matched to begin with. Furthermore, the two beasts' injuries were the same. It was very difficult to determine the victor between them under normal circumstances. As for Xiao Hua, Truth Listener did not take him seriously at all. Unfortunately, Truth Listener was wrong. At that moment, there was a wild roar. Not far from the two beasts' battle, countless hurricanes were produced. Countless indescribable fluctuations were produced in the void. The Chaos Continent's alien realm also began to distort in the hurricanes. An aura that was enough to affect the battle and make Truth Listener and the heaven-devouring beast feel threatened gradually revealed itself. Truth Listener and the heaven-devouring beast were shocked. They hurriedly looked over and saw that the bone-honing Xiao Hua had already rushed out of the space above Xiao Hua's head. The triangular blood bone was falling on the heaven-devouring beast's head. This. Truth Listener turned pale with fright and cried out, "You! Where did you get the heaven-devouring beast's bone? Quick, quick!" The heaven-devouring beast was overjoyed. "Hurry up and give me a hand. Let's kill this damn Truth Listener first." Kill. The blood bone landed on the celestial skeleton's head, and an ugly celestial with 3 heads and 6 arms quickly took shape. A thunderous voice came out of the celestial skeleton's mouth, and it was very straightforward. Woo! As soon as the heaven-devouring beast was born, different rays of light shot out from its 3 mouths and rushed towards Truth Listener like a waterfall. The primordial aura was even more obvious than that of Truth Listener and the heaven-devouring beast. Although the power of this ray of light was insufficient, wherever it went, fine lines would appear in the space. A slight sound of thunder was produced from these fine lines. Swish! Wherever the ray of light landed, the countless heavenly flowers that Truth Listener summoned were destroyed. The Buddha lotus that was as stable as a rock moved and fell towards the heaven-devouring beast's mouth. Moreover, the edges of the Buddha lotus were also destroyed by the ray of light. Phew! Seeing that the ray of light was weak, Truth Listener let out a long sigh and sneered, "So it's just a piece of paper. With such strength, you still dare to show off. Hee hee." The heaven-devouring beast suddenly let out a strange laugh. When this laughter fell into Truth Listener's ears, it actually made him feel uneasy. Rumble. 2 of the heaven-devouring beast's arms waved slightly in midair, and the somewhat dim ray of light suddenly brightened. Countless thunderbolts and thunder threads bloomed from the ray of light like flowers, instantly destroying more than 40% of the Buddha lotus. Damn it! Truth Listener was alarmed. He was already seriously injured and did not dare to rely on his body to fight head-on with the heaven-devouring beast. Therefore, the 2 beasts tacitly used spells to fight. However, spells were not his forte. In particular, Although the heaven-devouring beast controlled by bone-honing Xiao Hua looked inferior to Truth Listener, if he used his body's ability, the heaven-devouring beast was still much more powerful than Truth Listener. Therefore, the heaven-devouring beast's innate lightning power could match up to 40% of the power of Truth Listener's spells after being injured. Under the situation where Truth Listener and the heaven-devouring beast were evenly matched, not to mention 40% of the power, even 10% of the power was enough to push the victory to Xiao Hua and the heaven-devouring beast. How could this situation not shock Truth Listener? With 40% of the Buddha Lotus destroyed, the remaining could no longer resist the devouring of the small heaven-devouring beasts. Just as Truth Listener was shocked, they were all sucked into the heaven-devouring beast's stomach. After obtaining the Buddha's light, the heaven-devouring beast's body swelled up again, turning into endless demonic aura once again and pouncing on Truth Listener, sealing the space within millions of miles around Truth Listener. Even the connection between the pagoda and Truth Listener was cut off. After Truth Listener lost its connection with the pagoda, the Buddha's light immediately shrank rapidly, revealing Truth Listener's scarred body. "Little thing, I'll definitely kill you," Truth Listener yelled, his body suffused with a bloody light. Within the bloody light, fist-sized golden swan runes tumbled out like bubbles. As the golden swan runes tumbled, the sound of a wooden fish, the chanting of sutras, and the chanting of thousands of Buddhas came out from the golden swan runes. Layers of bloody Buddha's light surged out from the golden swan runes, not only piercing through the sealed demonic aura, but also turning into a bloody phantom that pounced on the heaven-devouring beast. The phantom had already been born, and the golden swan runes had completely turned into a golden liquid. Every drop of the liquid was like a minor chiliocosm, surging with the powerful power of karma. "Ha ha!" The heaven-devouring beast laughed. "Truth Listener, you've even used the bloody Buddha's shadow. I'm afraid you're already at the point of exhaustion, aren't you?" As it spoke, the heaven-devouring beast's figure pounced forward. The demonic clouds around its body merged with the demonic clouds that had previously sealed Truth Listener. A loud explosive sound was produced from the demonic clouds and the Buddha's shadow, and the entire space shook violently from this sound. -14. Chapter 42-53. Woo! Just as space trembled, Truth Listener suddenly moved. Its figure stirred up a gust of wind in space as it pounced at the celestial with its single horn. Honed Xiao Hua was taken aback for a moment, but he immediately understood Deity's plan to create a diversion. He smiled coldly, and his 3 heads spat out thunderbolts while his 6 arms reached into the void. The space around Deity rippled, and 6 skeletal arms were revealed. Hum! Before the skeletal arms appeared, Truth Listener suddenly opened its mouth. A fluctuation visible to the naked eye stirred up spatial folds. It was as though a fishing net had been lifted in front of Truth Listener, instantly binding the celestial's 6 arms. Furthermore, the fluctuation's momentum didn't diminish. While extinguishing the lightning, it also sealed the celestial's white bones. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was shocked. Darkness appeared in front of his eyes and ears as a dizziness arose in his mind. He couldn't stand steadily. Just as the celestial's white bones staggered and tried to break free from Truth Listener's soundwave, Truth Listener raised its head fiercely and looked at Xiao Hua. Its gaze suddenly landed on Xiao Hua like lightning. At that moment, Xiao Hua's essence had been absorbed by the celestial's white bones. He was extremely weak as he stood in midair dispiritedly, barely maintaining his balance. Truth Listener looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's heart immediately shrank. He had already seen through Truth Listener's sinister intentions. Truth Listener clearly wanted to fight to the death and kill him before Truth Listener was killed by the heaven-devouring beast. Xiao Hua's face was pale as he urged his body to escape. However, he wasn't Truth Listener's match to begin with. Now that his essence was damaged, he was no match for Truth Listener. Just as his body flew, Truth Listener's body had already escaped from the space sealed by the demonic aura like a blood-colored chelene. Although the demonic aura tore off his flesh and blood in midair, Truth Listener had already pounced in front of Xiao Hua's head in a few breaths. The murderous aura had already controlled Xiao Hua's surroundings. Xiao Hua found it difficult to breathe, let alone use his dharmic powers. "You! What are you trying to do?" Xiao Hua desperately tried to dodge. His pale face was filled with panic. The Harken was no more than 300 meters away from Xiao Hua. Behind him, the heaven-devouring beast was blocked by the blood-colored Buddha image, and the Deva skeleton was trapped by the sound waves. Although the two of them were about to break through the encirclement, and although the Harken would be killed by the two of them in mere moments, at this moment, Xiao Hua was the absolute ruler of this area. His goal was very simple. He wanted to deal a fatal blow to this human who had given him a sense of threat since he appeared on the Eldritch continent. Furthermore, he had absolute confidence that he could kill this human. Truth Listener lashed out with its hoof, shattering space and time. Light and shadow distorted as the despicable human's horrified face magnified infinitely in front of Truth Listener's eyes. However, at this moment, a roar that made Truth Listener feel disgusted from the bottom of his heart resounded. A wave of devil chi that made Truth Listener tremble in fear was born. Xiao Hua's fearful expression suddenly turned into ridicule, and his trembling body suddenly became as steady as a mountain. Amidst this steadiness, Xiao Hua's left hand, which had been hidden in his daoist robe, suddenly swung out. Truth Listener saw a flash of black light, and thousands of layers of devil chi sealed the surrounding space. Before he could even think of trembling, his huge body had already been split into two by the devil saber. Not only that, as the devil saber shrank back into Xiao Hua's daoist robe, the thousands of layers of devil chi turned into thousands of devils, madly pouncing on Truth Listener's corpse and desperately devouring the Buddha's light. When the heaven-devouring beast destroyed the blood-colored Buddha image and looked at Xiao Hua in shock, all the Buddha's light had already disappeared. Those devils were devouring the flesh and blood under the Buddha's light. Chempage. Xiao Hua coldly snorted and raised his left hand again. At this time, his left hand was slightly trembling, but devil chi gushed out from the surface of his body and quickly formed a layer of devil armor on his left arm. Immediately after, Xiao Hua's left hand grabbed, and the devil shadow pounced on Truth Listener's corpse. The thousands of devils that were preparing to devour the flesh and blood were frightened and scattered in all directions. The devil shadow fell into Truth Listener's corpse and passed through it. When the devil shadow flew out with a bloody light, Truth Listener's corpse turned into flying ash and scattered in the air. Come here. Xiao Hua's mouth was filled with killing intent. The blood-colored devil shadow obediently fell into Xiao Hua's left hand. The entire devil shadow spun rapidly in Xiao Hua's left hand, and finally condensed into a red-black rhombus. Come out. Xiao Hua ordered again, and the devil shadow obediently flew out of the red-black rhombus. The rhombus instantly turned into a sparkling and translucent blood-colored rhombus, emitting a misty luster. The luster rushed out of the rhombus and turned into Truth Listener's appearance. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the blood-colored rhombus. His mind swept it into the space, and then his left hand moved. Whether it was the devil shadow, devil head, or devil chi, they all shrank back into his body. You are the devil. The heaven-swallowing beast's tone was filled with surprise, but its expression did not change much. Xiao Hua respectfully said, "This junior has a devil clone, I presume senior already knew." If this junior did not know the devil clan's cultivation method, how could I know that the dragon bones of Supreme Dragon God were defiled by Supreme Dragon God? At this time, bone-tempering Xiao Hua also urged the Celestial to fly back. In order to not cause the heaven-swallowing beast to misunderstand, Xiao Hua kept bone-tempering Xiao Hua and the Celestial. The heaven-swallowing beast looked thoughtfully at Xiao Hua keeping the Celestial, and said indifferently, "At this time, you don't have to hide anything from me. You want to kill the Maitreya Buddha in this pagoda, right? Moreover, there is no dragon god here." "Senior is wrong," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "This junior can clearly tell senior that there is no Maitreya Buddha in this pagoda. If there is, it is only the remains of Maitreya Buddha. In other words, there must be a dragon god in this pagoda, and it is Supreme Dragon God who is using the remains of Maitreya Buddha to confuse Deity. How is that possible? How do you know?" The heaven-swallowing beast seemed to be in disbelief. "I and Deity have spent who knows how much effort and time to find out the truth. How do you know so well?" "It's very simple," Xiao Hua explained. "Namo Maitreya Buddha has already reincarnated, and his reincarnation is this junior's nephew." "Ah!" The heaven-swallowing beast was stunned on the spot, and said hesitantly, How can it be so coincidental? Yes, it is so coincidental. I don't know if Senior knows that there is an ancient saying in our human race, called there is no story without coincidences. Many things seem to have been arranged, and it is unimaginable. Xiao Hua nodded and said, When Junior saw the Buddha statue of Namo Mettria Buddha, I already knew about this coincidence. So, when Junior didn't know about the relationship between Deity and Namo Mettria Buddha, Junior didn't think much of it, but when Junior knew about this relationship, Junior already understood that Deity will definitely not let Junior off, and he will definitely force Junior into a dead end. Human race are human race. The heaven-swallowing beast looked at Xiao Hua, truly speechless. The human race has always claimed to be the leader of all living things, and I have always scoffed at it. But looking at it today, this sentence is not without reason. Actually, Xiao Hua said again, if Deity didn't have killing intent towards Junior, Junior would definitely not make a move. I believe Senior can also see this. Hee. The heaven-swallowing beast sneered, how can he not have killing intent? He is the same as me, and won't live for long. How can he let go of a human who snatched the Buddha light from his Buddha Lord? He has carried his Buddha Lord for millions of years. I believe this is also the reason why Senior is not worried about Junior, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Alas, if I didn't fight with Deity, it would have been fine. This fight has already worsened my injuries, and I am like a dried-up oil lamp. You don't even need to make a move, and I will die. At this point, why should I be afraid of you? The heaven-swallowing beast sighed lightly, and didn't hide anything, answering honestly. At this point, the heaven-swallowing beast's eyes suddenly turned and asked, That's right, that Pangu axe, you really didn't take it? Xiao Hua looked at the pagoda, then looked at the heaven-swallowing beast, and said with a smile, Senior doesn't need to be depressed, Venerable Dragon God is in this pagoda. As long as Senior finds Venerable Dragon God, won't these injuries be trivial? I hope so. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't answer his question, the heaven-swallowing beast somewhat understood, but then Xiao Hua replied seriously, That's right, Senior, that Pangu axe, Junior really didn't take it. Hearing this, the heaven-swallowing beast's heart that had just understood instantly became confused again. He didn't understand what Xiao Hua meant by himself. Senior, please wait a moment. Xiao Hua ignored the heaven-swallowing beast's confusion and flew up. Although it was very slow, it was still much better than before when he used the Deva Whitebone. The heaven-swallowing beast casually responded, and watched Xiao Hua fly towards the pagoda. Heaven-swallowing beast, come here. Xiao Hua flew towards the pagoda, looked up at the heaven-swallowing beast in the distance, and said, It's enlightened master. The heaven-swallowing beast stuttered. It seemed that this child was frightened. Try using the nine-toothed rake, see if you can topple this pagoda, Xiao Hua instructed. Hearing that Xiao Hua wanted it to work, the heaven-swallowing beast finally breathed a sigh of relief, and activated its avatar, waving the nine-toothed rake and hitting the pagoda. Buzz! The pagoda burst with a burst of Buddhist light, not only blocking the nine-toothed rake, but also sending the avatar flying. The heaven-swallowing beast was a little scared, but it didn't dare to be negligent. It took a deep breath, and the aura around its body surged. The nine-toothed rake flashed with hundreds of after-images, and attacked the pagoda. Unfortunately, the result didn't change, except that the heaven-swallowing beast was pushed back dozens of miles. No need. Xiao Hua waved his hand, stopping the heaven-swallowing beast from attacking again. The heaven-swallowing beast at the side suggested, This pagoda is very powerful, in my opinion, I'm afraid we'll have to use Pangu axe, you'd better go out and find Pangu axe first. Of course, Xiao Hua wouldn't reveal the whereabouts of Pangu axe. He smiled bitterly and said, With Junior's strength, I don't know how long it will take to reach Tongtian Peak. If I look for Pangu axe and come back, this innate heavy water will probably flood the primitive continent several times. -14. Chapter 42-54. Then there's no other way. Heaven-swallowing beast wags its tail, looking like it wants to help but can't. If I didn't have any injuries, I could give it a try. But now, I don't dare to casually make a move. Junior will think of another way, Xiao Hua says and moves his body to look around the pagoda. Soon after, Xiao Hua flies over the space barrier and comes to the other side, looking left and right at the pagoda. Finally, Xiao Hua flies to the top of the pagoda and looks at the mirror-like space barrier and ponders. Heaven-swallowing beast and heaven-swallowing beast wait for a moment, look at each other and fly up to the sky at the same time. Seeing the two beasts fly over, Xiao Hua's eyes suddenly light up and he reveals a confident smile. Heaven-swallowing beast and heaven-swallowing beast fly over the space barrier and see Xiao Hua coming over with a smile. Heaven-swallowing beast's face shows surprise and it says anxiously, "Daoist, you've already thought of a way?" "Hihi, of course." Xiao Hua nods and says while looking at the pagoda under his feet, "This pagoda and the pagoda in the inverted space are definitely not simple. The reason why the scenes in these two spaces are inverted is because of these two pagodas. Previously, when this Xiao arrived at the Imperial Palace, the space barrier was a mirror, reflecting all the scenes in this space to the other space. After this Xiao shattered the mirror, the space barrier appeared. This Xiao had always thought that the mirror was a restriction, but now, this space barrier is the real thing. But the reality is not so. The current space barrier is actually the surface, the mirror is the real thing. How can heaven-swallowing beast and heaven-swallowing beast understand this?" Both beasts had a baffled look in their eyes. "Ha ha." Xiao Hua says with a smile, "Actually, to be more clear, this pagoda under this Xiao's feet is the same as the pagoda in the inverted space. This pagoda is the real pagoda. The pagoda in the inverted space above our heads is only the reflection and surface of this pagoda. Its purpose is to cover the real pagoda in the other inverted space, and in that pagoda, there are the remains of Lord Dragon God and Narmometria." Sigh. Heaven-swallowing beast takes a breath of cold air and rubs its eyes in disbelief. It looks at the pagoda under its feet and says, "Daoist, what you said is too profound, I can't understand." "I think I understand." The heaven-devouring beast frowned and said, "Little thing, do you mean that there are two different pagodas in each of these two spaces? The one above us is the real pagoda used by Supreme Dragon God to set up the formation, and the pagoda below us is just a cover for that pagoda." "Indeed." Xiao Hua nodded. "If we blindly attack the pagoda in the inverted space, it would be like attacking the pagoda's shadow. We would never be able to break the pagoda. Only by attacking the pagoda in this space would we be able to break the pagoda in the inverted space." "I don't understand." Sky-swallowing sniffled and replied, "I only understand that we need to attack this pagoda." Seeing that the two beasts didn't understand at all, Xiao Hua simply didn't say anything more. He raised his hand and patted his head, calling out, "Fellow Taoists, Xiao Hua, Xiao Hua, Xiao Hua of the dragon bloodline, Xiao Hua of the phoenix body, Xiao Hua of the bone tempering, Xiao Hua of the green robe, body of the Buddha, and Xiao Hua of the devil spirit all flew out and said in unison, "I greet you. I believe that fellow Taoists already understand." Xiao Hua pointed at the exquisite tower of great derivation and said, "Only by pushing down this pagoda can we see the truth of the matter. Only then can we save the billions of lives in the great wilderness continent from the flood." Watch Eyes method. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was the first to roar. He opened his mouth and streams of heaven and earth yuan qi entered his mouth. His great wilderness dharma body rushed into the sky. The bronze brilliance of his body reflected an emerald green color. A spirit that wanted to compete with the heavens pounced towards the exquisite tower of great derivation. Seeing Xiao Hua move, Xiao Hua of the dragon bloodline also opened his mouth and let out a dragon roar. His huge dragon body was revealed, and the dragon horn on his forehead glowed with a mysterious dragon pattern. Xiao Hua of the phoenix body didn't want to be left behind, so he spread his wings and let out a deafening phoenix cry. The power of the stars and moon fell into his phoenix body, and layers of phoenix phantoms appeared on Xiao Hua's feathers. Xiao Hua of the Confucian body opened his mouth. Buzz, buzz. The 9 cauldrons glowed with multicolored light and gathered into a huge cauldron shape in midair. The destiny of the human race fell from the sky, and its momentum was no less than that of the exquisite tower of great derivation. Xiao Hua of the demon spirit was even more arrogant, and his demonic aura covered the lower half of the exquisite tower of great derivation. Tens of thousands of blood demons rushed out crazily and tore at the Buddha's light at the base of the pagoda. The Buddha's light tore the space apart, and whether it was the heavenly flowers, Buddha phantoms, or Buddha's voice, they all fell into the demonic aura and disappeared. Xiao Hua of the green robe stood on top of Xiao Hua of the demon spirit. As he waved his hands, thunderbolts condensed into the shape of a sickle, and wherever the sickle's blade passed, the void couldn't take shape. Namo Mettria Buddha, Buddha body chanted the name of Buddha, and stepped on a Buddhist lotus. The million Buddha painting reflected layers of Buddha phantoms on his body. Buddha body's hands formed a seal in front of his chest, and the power of mountains mixed with the power of stars was about to smash the pagoda. Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and the seal of overturning the sea rushed into the sky. Wherever the rays of light passed, lines of jade appeared around the seal of overturning the sea. Xiao Hua urged his magic power and shouted, "Fellow Taoists, let's attack together." As the seal of overturning the sea fell, all of Xiao Hua's avatars moved in tacit understanding. Other than the devil spirit Xiao Hua and the green-robed Xiao Hua who were at the bottom of the pagoda on the other side, the other avatars were at the top with Xiao Hua on one side. All kinds of divine abilities were unleashed together, and countless rays of light soared into the sky. Even the rumbling sound resounded throughout the entire space. Not to mention the sky-devouring beast was dumbstruck, even the sky-devouring beast's face was somewhat moved. Its previous calmness had already begun to weaken, and its main body under the demonic cloud slightly shrank back a bit, raising its vigilance. Namo Mettria Buddha, Namo Mettria Buddha. But within the pagoda, the chanting that sounded like thunder also sounded along with Xiao Hua's attack. That Buddha's rays of light were like the rising sun, covering the brilliance of all kinds of divine abilities and magic treasures. Even within that Buddha's rays of light, a small world that was like a sea of sand once again appeared. These small worlds were born and extinguished along with the Buddha's rays of light and gave birth to an endless amount of telekinesis. This telekinesis was continuous like spring water, unceasingly slashed by sabers, and its power was inexhaustible. It protected the entire pagoda. No matter how Xiao Hua and the others attacked the pagoda until its light and shadow were distorted, and even the nearby space was fake, the entire pagoda didn't collapse like Xiao Hua and the others thought it would. In a short moment, the raging force all disappeared. Xiao Hua and the other avatars somewhat awkwardly appeared in midair. The Buddha's rays of light from the pagoda were still there, and all kinds of strange phenomena from before had already disappeared along with the Buddha's rays of light, just like the pine trees on the cliff in the fierce wind. Little thing. The heaven-swallowing beast opened its mouth. Didn't you say it clearly before? This pagoda is the center of these two spaces, and is also the key to the great array. Do you think that with your strength, you can break it? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sigh. Xiao Hua sighed. How could he not know that his strength was insufficient? Even if several of his avatars were all at the great ascension stage, in this chaos divine realm, they really couldn't even be compared to the spiritual beasts they were riding. But at this time, in the entire space, in the entire chaos continent, how many assistants could he rely on? Only the Pangu axe. The heaven-swallowing beast seemed to be egging him on. Even if I am at my peak strength, I still have to rely on the Pangu axe to split this pagoda open. It's just like toppling Tongtian Peak. The bone-honing Xiao Hua looked at this similarly sky-reaching pagoda, and inwardly pondered whether or not he should take out the celestial bones. At this time, Buddha body opened his mouth. Namo Mettria Buddha, this poor monk has an idea. Speak. Xiao Hua asked indifferently. Our strength is insufficient. Facing this pagoda, we can only use our wits and not our strength. Buddha body didn't care about Xiao Hua's attitude and replied, this poor monk saw that this pagoda was built in the shape of the exquisite derivation pagoda, but in fact, it's not the exquisite derivation pagoda. If we use the exquisite derivation pagoda to break it, it'll be easy. Good. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, Grandmaster's words are very true. Although we don't know who built this pagoda, but it seems, the possibility of Jiang Luo's actions in his previous life is quite high. He must have some thoughts. Only in this life can he rely on the exquisite derivation pagoda to break the array. Unfortunately, The exquisite derivation pagoda is now in Grandmaster's hands. Under a freak combination of factors, the Tao of Heaven wants to borrow our hands to solve the disaster of the flood. Xiao Hua didn't comment and only replied indifferently. After obtaining Xiao Hua's help, Buddha body returned to his Niwen palace. When he came out again, he was holding the exquisite derivation pagoda that was overflowing with Buddhist light. Exquisite derivation pagoda. Although the heaven-devouring beast was mentally prepared, when it saw the real exquisite derivation pagoda, it still couldn't help but cry out. At the side, a faint trace of madness flashed through the heaven-devouring beast's eyes. Xiao Hua and his clones all held their breaths and stared at Buddha body with rapt attention. Buddha body flew out of his Niwen palace and landed at the base of the pagoda. He chanted the exquisite leaf scripture, and the exquisite derivation pagoda immediately fell into the Buddhist light of the pagoda. When the Buddhist light of the pagoda came into contact with the exquisite derivation pagoda, it instantly reflected thousands of Buddhist kingdoms. Within these kingdoms, there were countless Buddhist shadows of Nanwu Maitreya Buddhas smiling while holding flowers. When the exquisite pagoda fell into the pagoda, the Buddhist light of the entire pagoda suddenly converged towards the interior of the pagoda. After that, a rumbling sound could be heard from within the pagoda. A circle of Buddhist light flew out from the base of the pagoda and rushed towards the top of the pagoda. Wherever the Buddhist light passed, the originally indestructible pagoda collapsed layer by layer. The 9-layered pagoda collapsed in just a few breaths of time. The ring of Buddhist light didn't stop after reaching the top of the pagoda. It rushed through the space barrier and landed on the top of another pagoda. Then, it followed the top of the pagoda and fell toward the base of the pagoda. -14. Chapter 4255. Unlike the collapse of the pagoda in the inverted space merely overflowed with light and shadow. After the extraordinary Buddhist light faded, a huge pagoda with a dense and noble aura appeared. How is this possible? Is it really like this? The heaven-devouring beast couldn't believe its eyes. This was a mystery that even Deity couldn't see through, but a little cultivator of the human race actually saw through it. Moreover, he was able to easily uncover this mystery. Xiao Hua didn't pay attention to the heaven-devouring beast's shock. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the exquisite pagoda that had replaced the pagoda. A feeling of the vicissitudes of time involuntarily emerged from the bottom of his heart. At that time, he was still a chi condensation cultivator. Because of a stroke of luck, he obtained the exquisite derivation pagoda during a fierce battle between two foundation establishment cultivators. From then on, he embarked on the path of Buddhist cultivation. Now, the exquisite derivation pagoda had arrived at this moment. Tens of thousands of years later, in this unfamiliar place, he was about to settle the karma from countless years ago. Fate, is it really so wonderful? Xiao Hua muttered. However, in a moment, his heart felt as if it was being pierced by needles. Because if he hadn't obtained the exquisite pagoda in the Imperial Thunder Sect, it would have been obtained by Jiang Liuer in the future. It would have been the step he took to enter the Buddhist sect and blocked Jiang Liuer's path forward. There were 3,000 great Daos, and every cultivator was fighting for a chance of survival. Xiao Hua was no exception. However, Xiao Hua didn't want to snatch the chance of survival from his junior, and he didn't want to erase his senior sister's hope from this world. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's joy of breaking the seal disappeared. Xiao Hua indifferently ordered, "Take it." Namo Maitreya Buddha. Buddha body nodded and chanted Buddhist scriptures. The exquisite pagoda once again fell into his hands. At this time, there was no longer a pagoda in the entire space. A heavy pressure fell from the sky, as if the entire sky was about to collapse. "Fellow immortal, you're a bit reckless." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was somewhat displeased. "It's better to let Grandmaster try first. If there's any mishap, all our previous efforts would have been in vain." Xiao Hua said disapprovingly, "Won't. This space is one with the inverted space above our heads. Before either space collapses, the other will definitely not collapse. That space is supported by the giant tower, so there won't be any problems for the time being." As he spoke, Buddha body sent the dual derivation pagoda into his Niwan palace and came out again. However, he only stood behind the crowd and looked up worriedly without saying anything. Little thing. The heaven-devouring beast firmly believed in Xiao Hua now, and it said, "What should we do next?" "Enter the tower." Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the huge tower overflowing with awe-inspiring qi. He said confidently, "All the secrets are in this huge tower." "All right." The sky-devouring beast nodded and charged into the sky with the sky-devouring beast. At this time, the spatial barrier was even thinner and there was no resistance at all. When Xiao Hua and his clone fell into the inverted space, an aura that made Xiao Hua's body tremble came from the giant tower. Fellow Daoist. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua suppressed the excitement in his heart and said in a low voice, "This is the heaven and earth pagoda. If I'm not wrong, it should be the mother and child pagoda. There is also a child pagoda inside." "Oh, don't ask me how I know. This is the information from the literati star. It should be the holy news of all the saint." Xiao Hua was overjoyed and asked, "Do you know how to collect it?" "What we Confucian cultivators emphasize is passing on the torch." The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua smiled and said, "The holy news of the literati star is the inheritance of our human race since the birth of our race. There are countless profoundness in it, so it naturally has the secret of how to collect the heaven and earth pagoda." "So you're saying?" Xiao Hua was shocked. Just as he was about to ask, the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "This kind of inheritance is similar to the demon race, but it is different from the demon race. I can only use it when I need it or when my cultivation reaches a certain level. Moreover, my usual cultivation is different from the literati star. After all, we Confucian cultivators emphasize sailing against the current. If we don't advance, we will fall behind. The saints definitely won't let their descendants reap without sowing." "All right." Xiao Hua understood that his extravagant hope of obtaining the Confucian cultivation technique from the saints' literature song was shattered. "Fellow immortals, please wait a moment." The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua said confidently. He soared into the sky and landed on the top of the heaven and earth pagoda. He opened his mouth and the 9 continents cauldrons flew out. Then, he raised his hand and patted the top of his head. 5 colored true qi gushed out and landed on the 9 continents cauldrons. The 9 continents cauldrons let out a rumbling sound and clusters of mountain, river, and country patterns flew out from the cauldrons and landed on the heaven and earth pagoda. Strangely, when these mountain, river, and country patterns landed on the top of the heaven and earth pagoda, they immediately fell down along the body of the pagoda. Every time they passed by a layer of clouds, some of them would be left behind. When all 9 layers of the pagoda eaves merged with the mountain, river, and country patterns, the body of the heaven and earth pagoda let out a chanting sound. "Fellow immortal." At this moment, the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua said to the dragon bloodline Xiao Hua with a smile, "The sun and moon in the sky and the clouds covering the sky are the sky, the yellow soil laying the foundation and the mountains and rivers as the roots are the earth. The royal aura is the authority and the mountains and rivers as the seal are the monarch, the 5 elements are the form and the country is the tool is the human being." At this moment, the heaven, the earth, and the human are all present. It's time for fellow immortal to suppress them with the mountain and river seal. "Good." The dragon bloodline Xiao Hua laughed and opened his mouth. The mountain and river seal rushed into the sky with the royal aura and the 9 province cauldrons resonated with the nation weapon. When the mountain and river seal landed on the cauldrons, the entire heaven and earth tower let out the sound of flowing water. Along with the sound of flowing water, the sun and moon at the top of the tower moved like the rising and setting sun. As the sun and moon changed, the top of the tower was gently opened and the 9th layer of the tower turned into a giant plum blossom. After the plum blossom bloomed, it revealed the empty tower. At the same time, a dense benevolent aura uncontrollably leaked out from the bottom of the plum blossom and a faint Buddhist light shined out. "Hey! Why is it like this?" Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and revealed a surprised expression. It was as if the emptiness inside was different from what he expected. The heaven-swallowing beast was originally vigilant, but when it saw that the tower was empty, it rejoiced but also felt a bit disappointed. It sniffed and coldly said, Pangu's axe was placed here before. There is the aura of Pangu's axe inside. I see. Xiao Hua pondered. He looked at the 8th layer of the tower and said, if I'm not wrong, this 8th layer of the tower should be a Buddhist artifact. Before Pangu's axe was hung on the heaven connecting peak, it was placed here to suppress Buddhist artifact. That's right. The heaven-swallowing beast nodded and said, but I can't think of any other Buddhist artifact that Deity Buddhist Lord has that could compete with Pangu's axe other than the exquisite derivation pagoda. At this point, the heaven-swallowing beast hesitated, but after a while, it transmitted its voice. I thought Lord Dragon God was in the 9th layer of the tower, but I didn't expect him to not be there. Moreover, we caused such a huge commotion when we destroyed the Heaven and Earth Tower. Why, didn't he do anything? Senior Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua explained, didn't I say earlier? The Heaven and Earth Pagoda is a mother-child pagoda, and there's a sub-pagoda within it. The sub-pagoda and the main pagoda are two different spaces. Lord Dragon God should be in the sub-pagoda, and he should be at the bottom of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda right now. All right. The heaven-swallowing beast nodded and said no more. Then, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua once again activated the Mountain River Seal and 9 province cauldrons on the Heaven and Earth Tower. The 8th layer of the tower slowly bloomed like a lotus flower. As the lotus flower bloomed, a Buddhist light that connected heaven and earth was produced. Wherever the Buddhist light went, countless rivers of faith were born from the void and poured into the Buddhist light in an endless stream. Between heaven and earth, an incomparably solemn aura began to gather. Countless flying flowers, Buddha shadows, and heavenly dragons were also revealed. At the center of this multitude of strange phenomena was the Buddha shadow of Nanwu Metria sitting cross-legged. One of its hands pointed to the sky and the other pointed to the ground. It was the only one in the world. Looking at the appearance of this Buddha shadow, wasn't it the same as the one enshrined in the stone giant's magma shrine? Wasn't it Jiang Liu's appearance? And in this Buddha shadow, a 9-colored relic flashed with indescribable Buddhist light and emerged from the void. This is Nanwu Metria's relic. The heaven-swallowing beast opened its mouth in shock and couldn't help but cry out, Lord Buddha has indeed reincarnated. And, he even left all his reincarnation merit points here. Liua. Xiao Hua also couldn't help but tremble. He was already familiar with the Buddhist secret arts, so how could he not know the function of this ancient relic? Previously, he had thought of many possibilities. He thought that this could be the remains of Nanwu Metria, or it could be Nanwu Metria's relic. But he absolutely didn't expect that Nanwu Metria would leave all his merit here to condense into relic. No wonder Liua couldn't be accurately born in the Dawn Rain continent. No wonder he couldn't find the exquisite tower of great derivation first. No wonder I put him in the space to be destroyed for hundreds of years. No wonder he fell into the tribulation of Sutra seeking in paradise. At this point, Xiao Hua finally understood. Because before he reincarnated, he was simply staking everything on one throw. He didn't bring any merit or karma with him when he reincarnated. Could it be that he encountered some great difficulty here? So much so that he took such a risk because he couldn't grasp it. Thinking of Jiang Liu's suffering, Xiao Hua's heart couldn't help but ache. In the lotus-shaped pagoda, Nanwu Metria's Buddhist light overflowed. Layers of Buddhist halls and halls appeared one after another, magnificent and magnificent. And these halls and halls slowly sank into the 7th level of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda under the Buddhist light, as if they were also suppressing something. Little thing. The heaven-swallowing beast withdrew its shock and said, there's no need to say more. The relic of the 8th level is to suppress something in the 7th level. If Deity was here, this relic would naturally be his. It's very useful for his cultivation. Since he's not here, then, it's his. Following this hymn, the heaven-swallowing beast looked up at Buddha body who was hiding not far away. -14. Chapter 42:56. The sky-devouring beast looked up at Body and said meaningfully, I can see that he and Deiting's Lord Buddha are of the same lineage. Besides, in this life, he has snatched the opportunity from Deiting's Lord Buddha. All he needs to do is devour the fortune, and Deiting's Lord Buddha will be gone in this life. No, that Deiting's Lord Buddha will be gone forever. He will never have the chance to attain the fruit of Namo-Metria. Millimeter tilde Xiao Hua nodded. This junior understands. Saying that, Xiao Hua released his mind and wrapped the fortune, wanting to put it into the space. However, in his mind, the fortune was heavier than a mountain. Xiao Hua's mind couldn't move it at all. Oh! Xiao Hua frowned slightly. He glanced at Buddha body in the distance, who had lowered his head and ignored him. Xiao Hua patted his head again. A Buddhist light rushed out and landed on Tsai. Unfortunately, Tsai was still as steady as a mountain and did not move at all. Little fellow. The heaven-devouring beast was getting impatient. It sent a telepathic message. Kylie is the accumulation of merit from the countless reincarnations of Namo-Metria Buddha. How could it be collected by an outsider? Xiao Hua was unwilling to give up. He raised his hand and took out the Jewel Divination Pagoda and Mahavairokkana Buddha's edict. He wanted to take the fortune into the Jewel Divination Pagoda. But it just so happened that even after Xiao Hua exhausted all his abilities, he was still unable to move the Jewel Divination Pagoda in the slightest. Fellow immortal Confucian cultivator. Xiao Hua's eyes were a bit red. He looked up and asked, "Can it be that we can only enter the 7th floor after taking away the fortune? Since you already control the heaven and earth pagoda, why can't you directly?" Without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua immediately answered, "This junior actually doesn't control the heaven and earth pagoda. Instead, I used the mountain river seal and the 9 province cauldrons to suppress the heaven and earth pagoda. Without Namo-Metria's fortune suppressing the 7th floor, we can naturally enter. However, with the fortune suppressing it, how can we pass the 8th floor? Moreover, if we can't pass through the 8th level of the pagoda, we won't be able to enter the other levels of the pagoda, let alone break the formation. It seems, only you can do it." Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and looked at body with ridicule. Namo-Metria. Buddha body did not refute. He stepped on a Buddhist lotus and arrived in front of Tsai. Although Buddha body's Buddhist light was not as bright as Tsai's Buddhist light, when it came into contact with Tsai's Buddhist light, it blended into the Buddha shadow like water and milk. The moment the Buddha's light entered, Tsai trembled violently. The Buddha's shadow on Tsai opened its eyes and tears of blood flowed out of its eyes. The tears of blood flowed down the Buddha's cheeks and slowly dripped onto the 8th level of the pagoda. Namo-Metria Buddha. As the tears of blood dripped down, Tsai began to recite the exquisite Leaf Sutra, one word at a time. Namo-Metria Buddha. As soon as Tsai's Buddha shadow's voice rang out, body also sat down cross-legged and pointed one finger at the sky and the other at the ground. His eyes were slightly closed and he began to recite the exquisite Leaf Sutra. His recitation matched Tsai's. As the exquisite Leaf Sutra was recited, body's Buddhist light seeped into Tsai's Buddha shadow like hundreds of millions of tentacles. The Buddhist kingdom phenomenon also slowly disappeared. All the clones who had their attention on body heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, a cold, bloodthirsty, and emotionless voice rang out not far from body. "Let go of Tsai." As soon as the voice rang out, an earth-shattering killing intent filled the space. Within this space shrouded by killing intent, wisps of blood-red devil flame mixed with pitch-black devil chi emerged from the void. When the devil flame and devil chi landed in the air, they transformed into ferocious devils. All the clones were shocked and hastily looked towards the source of the voice. They saw that the source of the voice was Xiao Hua. However, at this moment, the badge on Xiao Hua's chest was seeping with blood. A broken heart-shaped mark was overflowing with devil chi. This devil chi was like a surging fountain that constantly gushed out of Xiao Hua's chest. This devil chi not only entered the surrounding space, but also covered Xiao Hua's body and gradually transformed into a devil armor. At this moment, the devil armor was different from before. An extremely large amount of Xianming devil lightning flickered between the devil flame and the blood-red color. This devil lightning condensed into a knot and covered the entire devil armor. Moreover, behind the devil armor, several tens of feet long devil thorns suddenly stretched out. The space near the devil thorns had already begun to distort and become extremely unreal. In particular, at devil god Xiaohua's back, a huge irregular mirror had already formed an outline. It was incomparably dark inside, and even light couldn't escape. Moreover, within the darkness, an indescribable aura leaked out from the edges of the outline. This aura was full of blood and evil. The moment the aura leaked out, light and shadow flickered in the air. Within the light and shadow, there was a strange devil kingdom vision. However, this light and shadow flashed and disappeared. Even with Xiaohua's many clones, none of them could see it clearly. Devil sovereign? Confucian cultivator Xiaohua was the most sensitive to the aura of the devil race. When he saw Xiaohua's devil chi rush out, his expression immediately changed and he couldn't help but shout, "Devil spirit brat, what's going on? Big brother has turned into a devil." Devil spirit Xiaohua had a long face. The blood-red figure appeared on the surface of Xiaohua's devil armor and was struggling with all his might. However, no matter how he struggled, he couldn't escape from the devil chi. This little brother can't break free, damn it. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua cursed angrily, "Why didn't you step into the devil sovereign realm earlier or later? Why did you step into the devil sovereign realm at this time?" Big brothers. Devil spirit Xiaohua had an innocent face. He tried to stick his head out and shouted, "This has nothing to do with this little brother. Although this little brother has devoured the devil spirit of the devil formation, if I want to advance into the devil sovereign realm, now is not the time. This little brother still needs some blood spirits." "Damn thing, quickly get to the point." Confucian cultivator shouted, "Why are you still thinking about blood spirits now?" Yes. Devil spirit Xiaohua was very afraid of Confucian cultivator Xiaohua. He hurriedly explained, "Forcefully advancing into the devil sovereign realm wasn't something this little brother deliberately did. It was Big Brother who pushed me. Just now, when Big Brother forcefully occupied this little brother's devil body, this little brother realized that Big Brother actually already had a heart devil when we entered this great desolate continent." "Nonsense." Confucian cultivator Xiaohua berated, "When we were in the ruins, we already killed the heavenly devil. How could he have followed us to the great desolate continent?" Devil god Xiaohua's aura rose little by little. His doppelgangers were really at a loss. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua and dragon bloodline Xiaohua were currently busy suppressing the heaven and earth pagoda. They couldn't spare too much energy to stop devil god Xiaohua's advancement. Buddha body was sitting cross-legged, chanting the exquisite leaf scripture along with Tsili's Buddha image. He acted as if he didn't hear devil god Xiaohua's situation. How could the other doppelgangers like Phoenix body Xiaohua and green-robed Xiaohua be a match for devil god Xiaohua? Hearing Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's berating, devil spirit Xiaohua explained again, "Big brothers, there's something you don't know. It was only when Big Brother occupied this little brother's devil body that this little brother was able to clearly see the ins and outs of the matter. Motherfucker, hurry up and say it. If you delay any longer, my true body will really be beyond saving." Dragon bloodline Xiaohua was truly anxious. Demonic chi covered several thousand miles of space. A sealing force that was several times stronger than the blood drop paradise gradually emerged. It was like a demonic cocoon wrapping everything within the inverted space. A feeling that made dragon bloodline Xiaohua tremble with fear rushed into his heart. He couldn't help but curse as he found it difficult to control the mountain and river seal. Yes. Devil spirit Xiaohua was also somewhat at a loss at this moment. He hurriedly replied, "Big Brother has always been concerned about Jiang Liuer. Long before Jiang Liuer went to Nirvana to seek the sutra, he would rather give up his life to forcibly stop her. He felt that since he brought Jiang Liuer to the hidden immortal continent, he must protect Jiang Liuer well. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to answer to senior sister. As soon as we entered the wilderness continent, we began to fight for Jiang Liuer's past life's merits. Big brothers, do you still remember the Buddha shrine and Buddha statue in the lava of the stone giant? It was also at that time that Big Brother had already planted the heart devil. And as time passed, Big Brother's heart devil grew stronger. Now, at this moment, Senior heaven-swallowing beast had clearly said that the fortune was Jiang Liu's last hope for cultivation in this life. Without the fortune, Jiang Liu's cultivation path would be blocked. Jiang Liu could only cultivate from the beginning again. Thinking about how he had personally blocked his nephew's path of survival, Big Brother, in the end, he had turned into a devil. He himself wanted to stop Master Body from collecting the fortune. Fellow Daoist, you're smart all your life, but this time you're stupid. Green-robed Xiao Hua couldn't help but mutter, Jiang Liu is only one person, even if he was Namo Metria Buddha in his past life. But now, there are billions of living beings in the wilderness continent. How can one person compare to billions of living beings? If billions of living beings die, the entire wilderness continent will be destroyed. But if Jiang Liu's path of survival is blocked, he can find another way to survive. Speaking of which, scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua sighed, and a look of realization and difficulty appeared on his face. He said, but you have to know that Jiang Liu is our nephew, but billions of living beings are not. We can't use the lives of billions of living beings to force fellow Daoist to personally destroy Jiang Liu. Moreover, if you don't love one person, how can you love the world? If fellow Daoist doesn't even cherish Jiang Liu, how can he cherish the world? Alas, with such a difficult choice, it's no wonder that fellow Daoist would turn into a devil. Phoenix cultivator Xiao Hua also sighed, if it was me, I also wouldn't know how to deal with it. Forget it, this matter is the foundation of fellow Daoist's rebirth. I can't participate, everything depends on fellow Daoist's choice. No matter what fellow Daoist decides, I will agree. While speaking, Phoenix cultivator Xiao Hua spread his wings, flew back several miles, and landed in a corner of space. Green-robed Xiao Hua blinked his eyes. Seeing that every time Buddha Body finished chanting a layer of the Heart Sutra, devil god Xiao Hua's devil chi would rise by a layer, he also sighed and said, originally, we were born from the same root, why are we in such a hurry to destroy each other? I also can't choose. After speaking, green-robed Xiao Hua's figure flashed and landed on the other side of space. -14. Chapter 42-57. Fuck. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was a little dumbfounded. He looked at the furious Xiao Hua and then at Buddha Subhuti, who insisted on chanting the scriptures. He didn't know what to say. In the end, he could only curse at fiend spirit Xiao Hua. I knew you were the root of disaster. I shouldn't have let you live back then. Brother, I'm innocent. Fiend spirit Xiao Hua really wanted to cry but had no tears. This was clearly Xiao Hua's main body that had been demonized. Furthermore, he had forcefully taken over his fiend body. He was the victim. Unfortunately, bone-honing Xiao Hua ignored him. He stepped on a cloud and landed in another spot in space. He squatted down gloomily and drew circles in the air with his thick fingers in boredom. Seeing that all the avatars had chosen to leave, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and dragon bloodline Xiao Hua were helpless. They looked at each other and flew up slightly. Although the two avatars didn't say anything, their actions clearly told everyone that they were also watching from the sidelines. Xiao Hua's avatars had made their decision. The heaven-devouring beast and heaven-devouring beast beside him also looked at each other. Heaven-devouring beast was the first to fly back a few kilometers. He was just a minor character in such a situation. It was already good that Xiao Hua didn't kill him when he killed Truth Listener. How could he dare to say another word? When the heaven-devouring beast saw that heaven-devouring beast had also left, he looked coldly at Fiend Celestial Xiao Hua. He didn't retreat or charge forward. Only his eyes revealed a thought-provoking expression. It was exactly the same as the look he had when he spoke of the importance of Cai Li. After all, the exquisite Leaf Sutra was a Buddhist scripture. There was always an end to the chanting. When the 7th level of the Buddhist scripture was finished, Cai Li's Buddha figure paused slightly and raised her head. Her face was already covered in blood and tears. However, Buddha Subhuti didn't stop. He continued chanting the incomplete Buddhist scripture on the 8th level. As the scriptures filled the space, the devil chi actually showed signs of retreating. Furthermore, The Buddha light that had fused with Tsili's Buddha shadow fell on Tsili like a hot knife through butter. Buzz! Tsili emitted a dazzling light. The entire Buddha shadow collapsed rapidly amidst the dazzling light, turning into a blood-colored Buddha light that fell into Tsili. Demon god Xiao Hua shook his arms and roared towards the sky. Demon god Xiao Hua spat out a mouthful of demon blood that could make even Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua tremble. When the blood landed in the middle of the surrounding demon chi, it immediately turned into 81 huge blood demon heads. When these blood demon heads appeared, they also roared towards the sky. However, they didn't spit out any demon blood. Instead, they produced an unparalleled suction force. Hundreds of millions of tiny blood demon heads were swallowed by these 81 blood demon heads. In just a few breaths, these 81 blood demon heads actually turned transparent and turned into 81 strange demon patterns. Chimpage. Demon god Xiao Hua coldly snorted. Those 81 demon patterns ignored the space and firmly sealed the 8th layer of the heaven and earth pagoda in an instant. Demon god Xiao Hua waved his left hand and the devil saber murder appeared in his left hand. Immediately after, demon god Xiao Hua slowly lifted his foot and walked towards Buddha body. With every step demon god Xiao Hua took, the entire blood-dripping space would tremble. The surrounding devil chi would spurt out a mouthful of blood-colored light and cleanse the space. When demon god Xiao Hua arrived in front of Buddha body, it was exactly 81 steps. The entire space also trembled 81 times. The entire space was filled with despair and deathly stillness. Demon god Xiao Hua looked at Buddha body who was sitting cross-legged, then looked at the Buddha light that had already covered Tsili's surface. His hoarse voice was like that of a god, containing a kind of ruthlessness. Are you going to stubbornly cling to your own course? That's right. Although Buddha body still hadn't finished reciting the exquisite leaf scripture, he still stopped and raised his head. His eyes were filled with compassion and determination. This little monk already made a decision when the flood fell. This little monk is willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of the billions of living beings in the great desolate continent, regardless of the outcome. You are forcing this, venerable. The emotion in demon god Xiao Hua's voice became increasingly faint. Buddha body raised his eyes to look at demon god Xiao Hua and said, neither too fast nor too slow. What joy is there in life? What bitterness is there in death? If this little monk can die for the sake of billions of living beings, this little monk is not afraid. Speaking up to here, Buddha body's eyes revealed a trace of warmth and said, Sandalwood, this little monk understands your heart. This little monk has never wanted to make things difficult for you. Didn't this little monk already say it when I first stepped into the great desolate continent? This little monk will absolutely not snatch Liu Er's Buddha fruit. This little monk has also once made a great vow that if the netherworld's demons are not eradicated, this little monk will absolutely not become a Buddha. Now, this little monk has once again made a great vow. Everything this little monk has obtained today, no matter how it was obtained, will definitely be returned to Jiang Liu Er in the future. Even if this little monk can attain Buddha fruit today, this little monk will absolutely not attain it. Since you don't want to make things difficult for this venerable, then step aside. Demon god Xiao Hua said coldly, as long as you don't touch this fortune, this venerable will absolutely not touch a single hair on your head. If you don't take this fortune away, the billions of living beings in the great desolate continent will have no way to survive. Buddha body continued to persuade demon god Xiao Hua, this little monk is only temporarily using this fortune. When this little monk returns to the hidden immortal continent, this little monk will immediately pass away in meditation and return all of this Namo Metria's merit to Jiang Liu Er. When you fuse with this fortune, you will instantly attain Buddha fruit. At that time, this venerable is afraid that this venerable will not be able to control you. Demon god Xiao Hua replied, this venerable cannot guarantee that you will be able to return this Buddha fruit to Jiang Liu Er. This venerable cannot believe you. Namo Metria Buddha. Buddha body chanted the name of Buddha and no longer tried to explain himself. Instead, he slowly chanted the exquisite Leaf Sutra. Under the Buddha's light, the Namo Metria Buddha gradually took form, woo. Almost without any hesitation, a ghost-like howl was born in the air. Before this howl, A pitch-black saber light flashed through the air. The entire space seemed to be split into two halves. The devil saber murder in Xiao Hua's left hand finally landed on Buddha Body's body beyond the expectations of all the clones. Namo Metria, Namo Metria. Endless Buddha chanted the name of Buddha Body's golden body. Dang, dang, dang. Countless sounds of wooden fish came from the rank 8 Buddha lotus. Swish, swish, swish. Innumerable flashes of blood flew out from the mirror behind Buddha Body's head. Buddha Body's golden body was split into two by the devil saber murder. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The golden liquid in the flesh and blood also filled the surrounding 100 jong of space. In this bloody scene, 10,000 Buddhas wailed, 10,000 flowers withered, and the Buddha light was dyed red. The 81 translucent devil runes let out extremely arrogant and wild laughter. Wung, wung. The entire heaven and earth pagoda let out a rumbling sound. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and dragon vein Xiao Hua, who were suppressing the heaven and earth pagoda, looked at this scene in disbelief. Dumbstruck expressions appeared on their faces. Seeing Buddha Body's flesh and blood fuse with the golden liquid and that human figure slowly disappear, dragon vein Xiao Hua rubbed his eyes and asked Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua in a loud voice, "Immortal. Fellow immortal, I didn't see wrong, right? This should be an illusion, right? Little monk body was killed by Xiao Hua just like that. This shouldn't be possible, right?" Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua didn't reply. Instead, he looked for a moment and said with a bitter smile, "If this little one's guess is correct, this is real. Our main bodies have already turned into devils. He really killed Buddha Subhuti. But why didn't the little monk fight back?" Dragon vein Xiao Hua was very anxious. Other than fellow immortal, only the little monk is the nemesis of devil god Xiao Hua, right? Because Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's face emitted a kind of holy radiance. His words were filled with reverence, because the little monk body wanted to die for the billions of living beings in the great desolate continent. He wanted to use his own death to tell our main bodies that he didn't have any selfish motives. He could give up everything he had. As long as our main bodies took away the treasures and broke the innate heavy water world destroying great array, he used his own death to repay everything he owed Jiang Liuer. Damn it. Dragon vein Xiao Hua's eyes shed 2 drops of tears. Little monk, I am inferior to you. Congratulations fellow Daoist. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua looked at dragon vein Xiao Hua. There was no joy in his tone. "You're crying." "I'd rather not cry." Dragon vein Xiao Hua stuck out his tongue and licked the tears at the corner of his eyes. "I'd rather be that kind of dragon vein who doesn't understand emotions and only knows how to cultivate. That's just a kind of extravagant hope." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua looked at dragon vein Xiao Hua and said with a double meaning, "We still have a long way to go. We still have to experience a lot. Along the way, what we gain is always more than what we lose." But dragon vein Xiao Hua still wanted to say something. Suddenly, a wave of fluctuation appeared in the space of the blood drop paradise. This fluctuation appeared in an extremely strange manner. It was like a heartbeat and also like a breeze. However, at the origin of the fluctuation, the devil chi that sealed the surroundings of the heaven and earth pagoda was suddenly rushed out by this fluctuation, creating a void passage. Damn it! Just as the fluctuation appeared, demon god Xiao Hua roared. The devil's saber in his hand turned into a bolt of lightning and landed at the location of the fluctuation. Shua! The space within several hundred jong was like a pool of clear water being split in half by the flying sword. Between the two halves of the space that was split in half, there were still tens of thousands of spatial fine lines from before. These fine lines were now filled with devil chi and devil flames. The devils hidden in the blood drop paradise roared and pounced towards the fluctuation that was also split in half. However, beneath the group of demons, there was a faint ripple that flashed like an undercurrent. Within this ripple, an obscure void passage flashed and disappeared. In just a split second, the void passage landed on the 8th layer of the heaven and earth pagoda. The space of the entire pagoda began to twist and distort rapidly. Xiao Hua felt his vision blurred for a moment. Then, the golden body of Buddha Subhuti, together with the rainbow of Namo Metriya Buddha, disappeared in a bizarre manner in this void tunnel. The clones were greatly alarmed and hurriedly looked towards the origin of the fluctuation. They saw the heaven-swallowing beast standing there proudly with its mouth slightly open, a faint Buddhist light overflowing. -14. Chapter 4258. Ninth grade Buddha Lotus. Happiness-melting heavenly demon was shocked. Why is it in your hands? The heaven-devouring beast did not answer. Instead, it opened its mouth and the Buddha lotus fell into its mouth. Damn it! Take it out for me. Happiness-melting heavenly demon cursed and waved its left hand. It was also the killing devil saber. There was no demonic aura or demonic light. It was just a simple flash of light, and the killing devil saber hacked into the heaven-devouring beast's head. Roar! The heaven-devouring beast's last roar was not a bark. A blood-red sound wave rushed out and blocked the killing devil saber for a few breaths. However, it was only for a few breaths before the purple Buddha lotus disappeared. Happiness-melting heavenly demon roared again, damn it. Then, the killing devil saber did not stop. The killing devil saber passed through the heaven-devouring beast's body. After the killing devil saber passed through, the blood-red light and Buddha light flew out along with the killing devil saber. The heaven-devouring beast's body turned into ashes and scattered in the air. The blood-red light spun rapidly at the tip of the killing devil saber. It condensed into a crystal-clear blood-red rhombus that emitted a misty luster. It was exactly the same as when Deity was killed. However, the luster that rushed out of the rhombus crystal was in the form of a heaven-devouring beast. As for that cluster of Buddhist light, it was emitted by Buddha body when he fused with the ancient Psyle. At this time, it had already fused with the purple ninth-grade Buddhist lotus. With the fusion of the Buddhist lotus, Buddha body had already touched the Psyle's Buddhist light and thoroughly penetrated the Psyle. As the Psyle melted, an 8-foot-tall Nanwu Metriya Buddha once again stood up from the golden liquid without fear. However, this Nanwu Metriya Buddha no longer had Buddha body's original appearance, but instead looked like Jiang Liuer. Heaven-devouring beast. Happiness heavenly demon swallowed the blood-red crystal formed by the heaven-devouring beast's soul and shouted fiercely, "How dare you spoil my plan? I will torture you to the point of death and let you know how powerful I am." After Happiness heavenly demon finished speaking, it stretched out a thick finger and pointed at Body's bald head. It laughed and said, "You're an interesting little monk. It seems like you already knew that there was something fishy about the Metriya Buddha Lord, but why didn't you tell your true body? Could it be that he wanted to be the last one standing and bear everything himself? However, how can your tender little shoulders bear all of this? Not only was he killed by the main body, but all his previous efforts were also absorbed by the Metriya Buddha Lord's Kylie. You said you were a little monk now? Or Lord Metriya? Namo Metriya Buddha. Buddha body only chanted the name of Buddha and did not answer. Actually, it doesn't matter if you're a little monk or the Metriya Buddha Lord. None of them can affect my grand plan, because I've already obtained the exquisite leaf scripture back in the imperial palace. Happiness melting heavenly demon chuckled. With this item, I'll be able to refine 70% of the Metriya Buddha Lord's fortune. Now, with the body of a deva and the billions of blood spirits in the primitive continent, I will be able to step into the realm of fiend deity and escape from this damned turbulence of time. At this point, the heavenly demon of Hua La Heaven suddenly stopped talking. He looked up in surprise and said in surprise, "What? Why is the incomplete primitive continent so lively today? Which great deity has decided to do this on a whim? Damn it, I'd better hurry up and get to work." Extreme joy begets sorrow. With that, the heavenly demon of Hua La Heaven's finger that was pointing at Buddha body's forehead suddenly turned into tens of thousands of tentacles and landed on Buddha body's golden body. Demonic spots suddenly appeared where the tentacles landed. The spots were like drops of ink falling into clear water, spreading wildly on Buddha body's golden body. No matter how much Buddhist light flashed, it couldn't stop it. Facing the heavenly demon of Hua La Heaven's supreme ability, Buddha body smiled faintly and put his palms together. Namo Mettria Buddha, disciple prays to Buddha here and earnestly asks Buddha to raise his hand. If it's the Buddha kingdom, then it's the Buddha kingdom. If it's the heavenly demon, then it's the heavenly demon. Buddha body's words were like pearls that turned into gold when they landed on the ground. Every time a word fell into the air, it turned into a golden rune that shone with golden light. At the same time, Buddhist lotus seeds emerged from the void and supported the golden runes that came out of Buddha body's mouth. When the golden runes landed on the Buddhist lotus, they immediately shone with boundless Buddhist light. Then, amidst this Buddhist light, the Buddhist lotus bloomed. In the end, 44 Buddhist lotuses surrounded Buddha body. Behind each Buddhist lotus, countless rivers of faith were faintly born. Murmuring sounds flowed out from these rivers of faith like flowing music. Moreover, right behind Buddha body's head, a Buddhist kingdom with a myriad of phenomena had taken shape. In the void, countless Buddhist kingdom phenomena appeared one after another. It seemed that with this verse alone, Buddha body was about to attain enlightenment. However, something seemed to be missing. The Buddhist kingdom phenomena seemed to be an illusion, a shell. There was no substance at all. The Buddhist kingdom was also like a pancake that could not be completed for a long time. Ha ha ha. After hearing Buddha body's heartfelt prayer and seeing the phenomena of the southern gate Mettria Buddha attaining enlightenment, happiness-melting heavenly demon did not panic at all. On the contrary, he let out a deafening laugh that was both arrogant and sarcastic. He pointed at Buddha body's head and said loudly, "This is really funny. Damn it, it's as if time has turned back." Back then, Mettria Buddha Lord also said the same thing and wanted to take the final step in the same way. However, he still could not escape the fate of being killed by me. This place is surrounded by time turbulence. Thousands of spaces are superimposed without any pattern. Even the heavenly demons of happiness-melting heavenly demon cannot find the location of this space. Little monk, use your bald head and think carefully. If the heavenly demons of happiness-melting heavenly demon came, I wouldn't have to go through so much trouble to come up with so many schemes. I would have already withdrawn and returned to happiness-melting heavenly. Little monk, stop dreaming. Without me, a heavenly demon, how can you Buddhist disciples attain enlightenment? You'd better obediently run into my mouth. Let me use your body to devour Mettria Buddha's merit. That's good too. Just as Hua Lahevan's heavenly demon was laughing out loud, an extremely dim green brilliance suddenly appeared within his huge demonic body. Then, this brilliance disappeared without a trace. Hey! How is this possible? Happiness-melting heavenly demon was shocked. Freedom heavenly demon? Why did you come from freedom heavenly? How did you escape from this space? Did you find a way to break through the time turbulence? Ah! What? What is this place? Why are you here? Just as happiness-melting heavenly demon was muttering to himself, 13 loud booms rang out. The 13 divine statues from the Soul Cultivator's ruins in the Spring Forbidden Sea flew out of the Devil Chi with green light shooting into the sky and landed around happiness-melting heavenly demon's body. Then, a series of cryptic green seal scripts burst out of the Devil Chi, and the 13 divine statues turned into 13 huge green stars that slowly rotated with happiness-melting heavenly demon as the center. Soul threads of different waves flew out of each green star, and depending on the angle of rotation, these soul threads fell into the Devil Chi from all directions. The Devil Chi didn't weaken under the influence of the soul threads, but it looked a little clearer, as if the 13 stars were purifying the Devil Chi. At that moment, the Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua, who had been missing all this while, transmitted his voice to all of Xiao Hua's clones. Little Mo Ling, I have already lured the happiness-melting heavenly devil into the Shenhua continent. Come and help me, little monk, Confucian immortal, don't hesitate. Come with I to suppress this heavenly demon. This is all arranged by our true bodies. Daoist Long Mai and the others, seal this entire space. Don't let any of the heavenly demon's clones escape. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's voice was like a flash of light, waking all of his clones up. How is this possible? Green-robed Xiao Hua stood up from a corner of the space and asked in confusion, didn't we say that we were going to ambush the heaven-devouring beast? Nonsense. The scholarly cultivator, Xiao Hua, became anxious and scolded. Among all of us, you are the most familiar with the Shenhua continent. Before our main bodies recover their minds, why don't you hurry up and help our fellow Daoist soul cultivator? Only when our true bodies awaken from their demonic state will we have a chance to survive. Yes, yes. Green-robed Xiao Hua suddenly came to his senses and rushed into Shenhua continent without delay. Almost at the same time, Xiao Hua, the devil spirit with the bone spear, flashed through the devil chi and rushed into Shenhua continent. Reverend Confucian immortal Xiao Hua looked at Body Buddha and said sadly, "You saw it. Our true bodies did this on purpose." Namo Metria Buddha. Body Buddha did not wait for Confucian immortal Xiao Hua to finish speaking. He raised his hand and slapped his forehead. A towering Buddhist light descended and suppressed the devil chi of the heavenly demon. Then, he waved his hand, and the exquisite Dayan Pagoda, Mahavairokkana Buddhist edict, 10,000 Buddhas painting, and other Buddhist treasures appeared one after another and landed on the restless devil chi and demon. Together with the soul cultivator's shaman artifact, they destroyed the devil chi. Good. Confucian immortal Xiao Hua shouted at Long Mai Xiao Hua, fellow Daoist, please take care of it. Okay. Long Mai Xiao Hua replied. Then, the 9 cauldrons flew out from under the mountain river seal and spewed 5-colored true chi at the heavenly demon's body. Although the heavenly demon had lost control of its body, there were still many other demons suppressed by the heavenly demon. These demons were frantically trying to break free, so they naturally had to fight against Confucian immortal Xiao Hua and Body Buddha. However, Xiao Hua's soul cultivator doppelganger, Confucian doppelganger, and Buddhist doppelganger all attacked at the same time. Not only did the soul cultivator doppelganger's shaman tool purify the devils, but the Confucian doppelganger Xiao Hua had already reached the scholarly level. His righteous energy surged out of his 5-colored true energy, and the power of life flashed with 5-colored brilliance. Not only did it exterminate the devils without devil bodies, it also rapidly compressed the devil bodies that were no longer under the control of the heavenly devil. -14. Chapter 4259. Similarly, Body, who had fused with Nanwu Metria Buddha's ancient glory, had reached a whole new level in terms of psyche power and faith power. The boundless Buddhist light swept across the devil's body like sharp flying swords. Many devils howled in agony as they were killed. Even more devil chi was melted, turning into pitch-black liquid that fell into the air. The battle outside the devil's body was extremely exciting, but the battle inside the devil's body was extremely thrilling. When the heavenly devil saw the freedom heavenly devil appear, the ecstasy he felt was indescribable. He had been trapped in this incomplete eldritch continent for many years. He had deliberately planned to destroy the world so that he could escape from this place surrounded by time turbulence. When he saw the freedom heavenly devil appear, he chased after him without hesitation. He wanted to find the way back to the freedom heavenly devil through the nameless space that the freedom heavenly devil had escaped from. Unfortunately, when he squeezed into that space, he was not greeted by the freedom heavenly devil. Instead, it was the soul cultivator Xiao Hua, who was surrounded by green light and filled with the aura of the freedom heavenly devil. When Xiao Hua had entered the eldritch continent, the heavenly devil had already seen him. However, Xiao Hua had too many doppelgangers. During the battle at Chao Tianqiu, the heavenly devil could not tell which doppelgangers had not appeared. However, when he saw Xiao Hua, the heavenly devil's heart trembled. He screamed and immediately wanted to fly out of the Shenhua continent. Just like what Xiao Hua had said to Xin Xin, once he entered the Xiao sect, he would be as deep as the ocean. Since the heavenly devil had entered the Shenhua continent, how could he escape so easily? The soul cultivator Xiao Hua used his soul technique to purify Xiao Hua's mind and called for the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua to suppress the devil chi of the heavenly devil. At the same time, he waved his hands, and countless soul strands turned into ropes to bind the heavenly devil. Damn it! Although Hua Letian didn't understand what exactly had happened, he was very clear that he had definitely fallen into Xiao Hua's trap. However, seeing that there was only soul cultivator Xiao Hua here, he was also clear that Xiao Hua's main body was still in a state of bedevilment. He only needed to escape from this space, and victory would still be within his grasp. Heavenly demon Hua cursed in his heart. His body trembled, and he instantly split into billions of doppelgangers. Some of them flew toward the Shenhua continent, some flew toward the starry sky, and some flew into space. Motherfucker! Xiao Hua cursed inwardly when he saw how cunning the heavenly demon was. Countless green lights flashed between his eyebrows as he unleashed all sorts of soul techniques to control the area within 10,000 miles. At the same time, he took out his YA brush and waved it, causing even more green fireflies to spread out and fall on the heavenly demon's avatar. Bang, bang, bang. Light explosions rang out as the heavenly demon's avatars were shattered one by one under the power of life. However, as the saying goes, as the saying goes, as the saying goes, as the saying goes, the devil is 10. Seeing that his clone was destroyed, the heavens devil laughed wildly. A hurricane suddenly arose, and the entire space became chaotic. Woo, woo. Just as the soul cultivator Xiao Hua was panicking, a demonic roar that was even more arrogant than the heavenly demon's roar rang out. Holding the bone dragon spear, demonic spirit Xiao Hua rushed into the Shenhua continent first. The moment demonic spirit Xiao Hua landed in space, he roared into the sky without saying a word. As he opened his mouth, he spat out a whirlwind that covered the 10,000 miles of space controlled by the soul cultivator Xiao Hua. Countless heavenly demon doppelgangers were like moths drawn to a flame, obediently falling into his mouth one by one. Damned demon scum! The heavenly demon Hua was flustered and exasperated. He had lived for so many years, but he had never seen a human who had not set foot in the immortal realm cultivate a demonic doppelganger. Moreover, the strength of the demonic doppelganger seemed to be a bit stronger than the original body. Unfortunately, he only dared to curse in his heart and did not dare to reveal himself. At this time, the heavenly demon Hua had already sensed the strangeness of the Shenhua continent. He also understood that although he was more powerful than demonic spirit Xiao Hua, in this space, he was definitely no match for demonic spirit Xiao Hua. What should I do? Faced with such a hopeless situation, the heavenly demon Hua truly did not know what to do. However, when he looked at the soul cultivator Xiao Hua, the heavenly demon Hua suddenly had an idea. Many of his doppelgangers charged towards demonic spirit Xiao Hua, towards the outside of the space, and towards the unrestrained heavenly demon's aura. Hehe, you're already here, and you still want to leave? Demonic spirit Xiao Hua laughed heartily. Back then, I also wanted to. Ayo, not good. As he spoke, demonic spirit Xiao Hua's body trembled, and his demonic body transformed into a demonic formation that enveloped the surrounding area. Not only did it cover 10,000 miles, but it also went beyond 10,000 miles, until it reached tens of thousands of miles. However, it was also at this moment that Xiao Hua's devilish body started to tremble rapidly. Various devilish heads that looked completely different from Xiao Hua started to appear in various parts of the devilish formation. Moreover, the devilish formation started to collapse one after another. Damn it! How could soul cultivator Xiao Hua not know that the heavenly demon Hua was taking advantage of the situation to corrupt demonic spirit Xiao Hua? Although demonic spirit Xiao Hua had already become a demon sovereign, he still couldn't resist the heavenly demon Hua. Go! Soul cultivator Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He waved the subbrush in his hand and stabbed it into the demonic formation like a sharp sword. However, at the same time that soul cultivator Xiao Hua was killing the heavenly devil, his devil formation was also rapidly shrinking. At this time, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's body flashed with a green light, and the unrestrained heavenly devil's aura suddenly weakened. Xiao Hua was even more shocked. He already understood the unrestrained heavenly devil's plan. The unrestrained heavenly devil's essence in the space had not been completely refined. If it was used by the unrestrained heavenly devil, wouldn't the unrestrained heavenly devil be able to do whatever it wanted on Shenhua continent? Although he had trapped the heavenly demon Hua in the space and saved the billions of lives on the Eldritch continent, what about Shenhua continent? There were billions of lives on Shenhua continent right now. Rumble. At this critical moment, a shocking thunderstorm swept across the sky above Shenhua continent. On the broken immortal slaying platform, thunder water gushed out like a flood, covering the demonic formation formed by demonic spirit Xiao Hua within 100,000 feet of soul cultivator Xiao Hua. Above the thunderstorm, the green-robed Xiao Hua's figure appeared. Damn it! How dare you show off in front of me? I'll let you know how powerful I am. The green-robed Xiao Hua protected demonic spirit Xiao Hua with the thunderstorm as he cursed. Then, he struck out several spells to seal several important places in the space. He then raised his hand and pointed again. Buzz! The sun star in the sky also emitted sun-true fire, which poured into the thunderstorm. Ah! The heavenly demon Hua Les wails were incessant in the thunderstorm. Phew! Seeing the green-robed Xiao Hua come to help, soul cultivator Xiao Hua let out a long breath. He thought that he and demonic spirit Xiao Hua could deal with the heavenly demon Huala easily, but he didn't expect the heavenly demon Huala to be even more difficult to deal with than the freedom heavenly demon. Go to hell! Soul cultivator Xiao Hua was naturally furious now that he had nothing to worry about. He activated his soul spell to kill the heavenly demon Huala's doppelgangers. At this time, demonic spirit Xiao Hua also broke free from the heavenly demon Huala and used the power of the thunderstorm to counterattack the heavenly demon Huala. After witnessing the heavenly demon Huala's abilities, the green-robed Xiao Hua didn't dare to be distracted. He released his divine sense to cover the entire space and closely monitored the situation. After an hour, more than 70% of the heavenly demon Huala's doppelgangers were killed, and the remaining ones were struggling at death's door. Suddenly, the green-robed Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and hurriedly waved his hands. Layers of seals appeared in mid-air, and within the seals, the originally formless heavenly demon Huala's doppelgangers froze. Damn it! Even the green-robed Xiao Hua felt a headache coming on. He couldn't help but complain, why is this heavenly demon Huala so difficult to deal with? Ayo, not good. Seeing that a few of the heavenly demon Huala's doppelgangers were about to escape from the space, the green-robed Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. This was Xiao Hua's biggest secret, and also the secret that all his doppelgangers relied on to grow. If the heavenly demon Huala escaped, this secret would be exposed to the public. Chimpage. At this time, a cold voice like that of a god appeared. The entire space was suddenly completely sealed. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure appeared beside the green-robed Xiao Hua. Good boy. The green-robed Xiao Hua saw Jade Archive Xiao Hua and immediately beamed with joy. He said, "Fellow Daoist, you are finally here. I will leave this place to you. Fellow Taoists, I will have to trouble you." Jade Archive Xiao Hua cupped his hands and bowed. However, his aura was different from before. It was as if he had cut off something, but also as if he had sublimated something. His every movement faintly had the aura of controlling the entire space. This aura was comparable to the heaven and earth, and also had the tendency to surpass inner sage and outer monarch. The green-robed Xiao Hua looked envious, but at this time, he did not dare to say anything. He casually cupped his hands and returned the greeting before retreating to the side. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked around. He looked at the heavenly demon Huala's doppelgangers in the lightning, and then looked outside the lightning, at the place where the green-robed Xiao Hua had not paid attention to before. Seeing that Jade Archive Xiao Hua was looking at another place, the green-robed Xiao Hua's heart thumped loudly. An extremely bad feeling arose in his heart because that place was where the Shenhua continent was located. All the Fortune Gate's disciples and the flashy mundane world were also there. What is Buddha? What is devil? Jade Archive Xiao Hua said indifferently. What is light? What is darkness? Where there is light, there is darkness, and where there is darkness, there is light. There is no absolute light, and there is no absolute darkness. Therefore, if there is Buddha, there is devil, and if there is devil, there is Buddha. There is no Buddha that has been completely erased, and there is no devil that has been completely exterminated. Since there is Buddha on the Shenhua continent, then, it is inevitable that there will be devil. Blindly avoiding the distinction between Buddha and devil will only cause the entire Shenhua continent to collapse. Since all the heavenly demons have come to cause trouble, then, all of you can stay here. -14. Chapter 4260. As he spoke, countless strange fluctuations appeared in the air. Wherever the fluctuations passed, heaven and earth change. But as for where the changes were, even Xiao Hua couldn't tell. Xiao Hua's seal on the Jade Archive began to loosen as these fluctuations appeared. Even the green-robed Xiao Hua could see faint clones of the Hua la heavenly devil mysteriously dissipating in various parts of the space. Fellow Daoist. Xiao Hua cried out, "You! What are you doing? Don't you know the principle of eliminating evil? You're letting the tiger return to the mountain, leaving behind future troubles?" He. Xiao Hua said with a confident tone. Could it be that fellow Daoist still doesn't understand? Although Shenhua continent is our biggest secret, with the development of Shenhua continent and our Fortune Gates disciples, it is inevitable that they will leave Shenhua continent. Restricting Shenhua continent is the same as restricting our disciples. It is a selfish thought. Instead of hiding it like this, why don't we just let Shenhua continent go? But Xiao Hua said anxiously, if that's the case, our secret. Won't it not be a secret anymore? Ian, then I ask you, if you have a priceless pearl, where would you hide it? Xiao Hua asked. Xiao Hua was surprised, and asked in confusion, Does this have anything to do with Ai's worries? Yes. Xiao Hua nodded, answer Ai's question. Put it in the spatial ring, in the Kunlun mirror, or in Shenhua continent. Xiao Hua pondered for a moment before answering. Xiao Hua nodded and smiled. Fellow Daoist is right. But, does fellow Daoist know the story of passing off fish eyes as pearls? Of course I know. Xiao Hua nodded. Usually, I read a lot of books. Then, fellow Daoist, do you think it's better to hide the pearl in a place and worry about it all day long, or to throw it into a pile of fish eyes so that others won't know even if they see it? Xiao Hua asked rhetorically. Green-robed Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and replied, I feel that it's better to keep it for myself. I can't be at ease throwing it among the fish eyes. Jade Archive Xiao Hua said, there are countless spatial interfaces in this world, and each spatial interface has an edge. Breaking through this edge will lead to another spatial interface. Although I don't know what is beyond the edge of Shenhua continent, I still don't know. However, since all of you can freely enter and exit the Shenhua continent based on your senses, the Shenhua continent must be like the other spatial planes and can be entered by others. Therefore, instead of imprisoning the entire Shenhua continent, why don't we throw the entire Shenhua continent into the various spatial realms? Whoever comes, they don't even know that this is a continent that we control. Whoever comes, won't they be at our mercy? I seem to understand. Green-robed Xiao Hua nodded. What you mean is that there is no need to deliberately seal off the Shenhua continent. Anyway, the Shenhua continent is the same as the hidden immortal continent. Even if cultivators come in, they will not know that this space belongs to us. That's the reason. Jade Archive Xiao Hua replied. Fellow Daoist, you are really imaginative. Green-robed Xiao Hua sighed. And you are really daring to let it go. If it were I definitely wouldn't dare. Sigh, do you think I can bear to? Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. The Shenhua continent is already filled with Buddhist sects, and there are frequent occurrences of Buddhist sects. However, if there are Buddhas, what about demons? Without demons, how can Buddhas become Buddhas? Therefore, the entire Shenhua continent has formed a kind of abnormal psychokinesis, and it is this psychokinesis that attracts the heavenly demons. Damn it! Green-robed Xiao Hua suddenly understood. No wonder. I knew it. We are only at the peak of the human world. How could we attract the heavenly demons from the heavenly demons and Hua la heaven? So the root is here. But, even so, you can't let the heavenly demons live, right? Aren't you afraid that the heavenly demons will overturn the heavens? Divulging information about us? If it were any other space, I naturally wouldn't be able to do anything. However, in this space, on this Shenhua continent, we can say whatever we want, right? Even the heavenly demons from the unrestrained heaven and Hua la heaven have to listen to us, right? Jade Archive Xiao Hua replied with a mysterious smile. I understand. Green-robed Xiao Hua nodded again, but in the end, he still reminded, however, I still have to remind fellow Daoist that heavenly demons are heavenly demons after all. They are far from what we can deal with our current strength. Fellow Daoist, don't let your guard down. In this world, there is something called a whetstone. With this object, the blade can be sharpened. Jade Archive Xiao Hua said meaningfully. Since we want to be strong, to be the sharpest blade in the world, if we don't have a whetstone like the heavenly demons, how can we be sharpened? All right. Green-robed Xiao Hua heard this and his heroic spirit soared. He shouted, I will follow fellow Daoist and see how powerful the whetstone forged by the heavenly demons is. He, no matter how powerful it is, it's still in our hands. Jade Archive Xiao Hua chuckled and waved his hand. All the lightning within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers suddenly retracted, condensing all the demonic chi into a demonic pearl. He then said, Demon spirit, hurry up and kill the happiness-melting heavenly devil. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and Demon Spirit Xiao Hua both listened to Jade Archive Xiao Hua and Green-robed Xiao Hua's words. They trembled with fear but also had some expectations. Now that they heard Jade Archive Xiao Hua's orders, how could they not know that Jade Archive Xiao Hua had a card up his sleeve? Demon Spirit Xiao Hua replied loudly and revealed himself, opening his mouth and swallowing the demonic bead into his abdomen. Sigh. After Demon Spirit Xiao Hua swallowed the demonic bead, Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed again. As the saying goes, man proposes but God disposes. This is exactly the case. After such a long time of planning, in the end, it was just a good idea or an opportunity. Even if fellow Daoist I and fellow Daoist had been vigilant, I'm afraid we still couldn't escape the fate of death. Fellow Daoist, what the hell is going on? Hurry up and tell us. Green-robed Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. How did you know there was a heavenly demon in the Imperial Court of Heaven? Let's go, we'll talk about it when we get out. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua laughed. I'm afraid Buddha body outside is going to be wronged to death. Since Jade Archive Xiao Hua could enter the space, the Soul Cultivator Grand Formation outside naturally had already succeeded. Moreover, Xiao Hua's demonic body had already been suppressed by the Soul Cultivator, Buddhist, and Confucian cultivators. When Xiao Hua's mind returned to its original position, Demon Spirit Xiao Hua flew out. In just a moment, the demonic chi around Xiao Hua's body had already shrunk back into its body. The devil head and demonic chi brought by the heavenly demon were also swallowed by Demon Spirit Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua opened his eyes. The first thing he did was to look at Buddha body who had transformed into Jiang Luo's appearance. He bowed and saluted. I've wronged Great Master. This is all I's fault. Namo Metria Buddha. Buddha body's face had the same unfathomable benevolence. He put his palms together and replied, It doesn't matter whether it's right or wrong. This is the knot in our hearts. You get rid of the heart devil, I also get rid of the heart devil. Great kindness. Little monk. The green-robed Xiao Hua was baffled. He didn't dare to speak bluntly to Xiao Hua. He turned his head and asked Buddha body, What kind of Zen trick are you playing? How come I don't understand? Namo Metria Buddha, I can't say it, I can't say it. Unexpectedly, Buddha body smiled and shook his head, not answering. Hearing this, Xiao Hua smiled and said, Great Master, you'd better explain it to them. Otherwise, I'll feel embarrassed. All right. Buddha body seemed to have already let go of everything. He nodded and explained, Then this poor monk will explain it to you. Fellow Daoist Jade Archive admitted his mistake. He misunderstood this poor monk and thought that this poor monk wanted to snatch Jiang Luo's karmic fruits. Although he had such thoughts because he fell into the heavenly demon's trap, the real reason was that he had such real thoughts. He really didn't want this poor monk to gain merit in the primitive continent and destroy Jiang Luo's future. However, this poor monk only wanted to save the billions of lives in the primitive continent and enlighten those pitiful low-level beasts. I didn't have the intention to snatch anyone's merit. However, no matter how this poor monk explained, fellow Daoist Jade Archive refused to believe me. This is the knot in this poor monk's heart. This knot in this poor monk's heart caused the estrangement between this poor monk and fellow Daoist Jade Archive. This estrangement also became the opportunity for the joyous heavenly demon to attack fellow Daoist Jade Archive. Of course, when fellow Daoist Jade Archive waved his demonic saber to kill this poor monk also understood. Fellow Daoist Jade Archive was the kind of person who was greedy for small gains but had a righteous heart. When he killed this poor monk, he was actually killing himself. He would rather die than let his juniors and nephews be harmed. This poor monk was actually fellow Daoist Jade Archive himself, and the Jiang Liuer he cared about was someone else. In this world, how could there be a reason to go against oneself? Therefore, this poor monk's knot in this poor monk's heart was also untied at that moment. That's not all. Xiao Hua said with a smile, "I saber not only untied the knot in our hearts, but it also allowed you to gain a blessing in disguise, right?" Indeed. Buddha body admitted. As long as the Buddhists of the Buddhist sect leave the mortal world, they have to cut off their roots in the mortal world. However, this poor monk does not have any roots in the mortal world. My flesh and blood are not complete, so how can I cut it off? And fellow Daoist Jade Archive's saber cut off this poor monk's mortal world. Excellent, excellent. The green-robed Xiao Hua could not help but praise. Only with great kindness can there be great returns. However, Master, in your current state, what is the use of cutting it off? The bone-honing Xiao Hua looked at the completely different Buddha body and asked thoughtlessly. Buddha body laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. This poor monk does not care whether it's useful or not. All this belongs to Jiang Liuer. This poor monk has already made a great vow. As long as there's a chance, this poor monk will return everything to Jiang Liuer." As he said that, Buddha body looked at Xiao Hua meaningfully and said, "Don't you think so, fellow Daoist?" Of course. Xiao Hua did not evade anymore and said with a smile, "What you think is what I think, and what you do is what I want." -14. Chapter 4261. Fellow Daoist, we already know about Buddha body, but what's going on with this heavenly demon of joy? This happened too suddenly, and there were no signs at all. I really don't know what's going on. Bone-honed Xiao Hua was the most outspoken. After understanding the knot between Xiao Hua and Buddha body, he immediately asked about the heavenly demon of joy. It's actually very simple. At this moment, Xiao Hua looked at everyone and explained, "It's just like what fellow Daoist soul cultivator told everyone earlier." Then, Xiao Hua explained the details of the matter to him. In fact, as early as when Xiao Hua saw the Buddha statue of Jiang Liuer's previous life in the shrine, Xiao Hua had doubts about his own Buddhist cultivation, and the target of this suspicion naturally fell on Buddha body. Even though Buddha body was explaining, his explanation was actually Xiao Hua's self-reflection, and it was not enough to dispel Xiao Hua's doubts. At this moment, Xiao Hua's heart had already been planted with a demon. The Buddha statue in the shrine had tears in its eyes, and the Buddha statue had been torn apart in its heart. This was not done by Maitreya Buddha, but by the heavenly demon of joy to lure Xiao Hua into becoming a demon. At that time, Xiao Hua did not have any doubts. Later, when the dragon pattern appeared, the dragon-patterned stone giant of the same lineage regarded the stone giant who worshipped Namo Maitreya as an enemy, and this made Xiao Hua see two undercurrents in the Eldritch continent. Since there were undercurrents, there was naturally a mastermind behind the scenes. Xiao Hua naturally believed that the mastermind behind the scenes was Namo Maitreya and the god of the dragon race. Of course, Xiao Hua already knew that Namo Maitreya had reincarnated, so the mastermind behind the scenes must be the dragon race or the successor of Namo Maitreya. After Xiao Hua learned about the Imperial Palace from Devouring Heaven, he entered the Imperial Palace to defeat the 5 small eldritch beasts, rescued Dragon Gate Xiao Hua and Phoenix Body Xiao Hua, and even subdued the Black Jade Chelene. The target of Xiao Hua's suspicion fell on the successor of Namo Maitreya. After all, the Imperial Heaven Tower had existed for many years, and according to the Black Jade Chelene, every once in a while, the Imperial Heaven Tower would open up, and weapons and crystals would appear. This kind of miracle would not appear out of thin air. There must be an invisible hand behind it. However, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was a 5-clawed golden dragon. He was injured in Chao Tien Tower, yet no dragons appeared. This could only mean that there were no dragons or their descendants in Chao Tien Tower, or that there was a dragon that looked down on the five-clawed golden dragon. Apart from this possibility, it could only be the successor of the Maitreya Buddha. Moreover, this imperial heaven tower was originally the exquisite derivation pagoda that opened the heaven and earth. This further confirmed Xiao Hua's conjecture. However, as the Fortune Gate disciples' teaching power expanded, and Xiao Hua witnessed the power of the Dragon Clan's faith, a new idea surfaced in his mind. He did not think that the Dragon Tribe and the Buddhist sect, who were fighting fiercely on the primitive continent, did not fight in the imperial palace. The Dragon Clan would not allow the Buddhist sect to build the imperial palace of heaven without taking any action. However, other than the imperial heaven tower, there was no other imperial heaven tower in the Fortune Gate's territory, which made Xiao Hua even more suspicious. When Xiao Hua learned from Liu Yi that someone was spying on him, he saw the Buddha statue that was split in two inside the lava giant's body. At that time, Xiao Hua suddenly had a feeling that something was wrong. Because the Buddhist sect emphasized on imperceptible influence, even if it was Buddhism, the more simple it was, the higher the level it was. How could the Buddhist sect use bloody tears as a warning? If it was faint tears, then that was the real Buddhist sect's realm. Of course, the stone giant's body was covered in lava, and using lava to make tears would always be red. This was reasonable. But the most unusual thing was that the Buddha statue had cracked. What was even stranger was that the stone giant had only wept bitterly at the beginning, and then later, it did not seem to care. At least, it was not as pious as Xiao Hua had imagined. The Buddha statue had always been a symbol of faith, and with the stone giant's faith power, it was impossible for the Buddha statue to crack, even if Buddha body was teaching the stone giant. Even when the Buddha Lord's Buddha fruit was replaced, the Buddha statue would not crack, and only its appearance would change. Although the Buddha statue cracked, Xiao Hua's heart also cracked, but it also made Xiao Hua suspicious. Xiao Hua suspected that the Buddha statue and the stone giant's faith were two completely different things. When Xiao Hua went to another group of stone giants to look at the dragon god statue in the shrine, he had a whimsical idea. He believed that the dragon tribe's descendant and the Buddhist sect's successor did not exist on the primitive continent, and that there was only a third force that borrowed the dragon tribe's and Buddhist sect's power. As for who the third force was, Xiao Hua suspected it was the heavenly devil. In truth, there was no special reason or divine ability, but Xiao Hua had suffered too much from the heavenly devil recently. Xiao Hua felt like a bow cup and a snake's shadow. Since he had a suspect, Xiao Hua naturally had to come up with a countermeasure. However, Xiao Hua already knew that he might have been possessed by the heavenly devil, and even his other clones might be tainted by the devil chi. If he was not careful, he might be taken advantage of by the heavenly devil. Therefore, Xiao Hua could only choose the soul cultivator Xiao Hua, who was connected to him in terms of soul, to be his helper. He only told the soul cultivator Xiao Hua about his thoughts in the mysterious dark cloud, and told him to hide in the Shenhua continent. He even told him not to tell his other clones, and not to come out of the Shenhua continent unless it was a critical moment. However, with the appearance of the heaven-devouring beast and Deity, Xiao Hua felt that his worries were groundless, because all his previous suspicions were perfectly explained by the two beasts. Even the heaven-connecting peak and Chaotian Tower could be attributed to the reckless dragon god. However, Xiao Hua was still cautious, and did not let the soul cultivator Xiao Hua appear in Chaotian Tower, and the result was exactly what his clones saw. Xiao Hua's suspicions were correct. Besides the dragon god and Nanwu Maitreya, there was indeed a third almighty on the Eldritch continent, and that was the heavenly devil. As for why the dragon god and Nanwu Maitreya came to the Eldritch continent, and whether the heavenly devil came with them, Xiao Hua did not know. Damn it! The bone-honing Xiao Hua was dumbfounded when he heard this. His jaw almost dropped to the ground. It's so complicated. I saw all of this with my own eyes, but why didn't I feel anything special? So, Xiao Hua smiled and said, fellow Daoist bone-honing, and fellow Taoists, you still have a long way to go. If you want to be a real cultivator, you have to be a real person first. Damn it, I am not a person to begin with. Why should I be a person? Dragon Vane Xiao Hua used the mountain and river seal to suppress the heaven and earth pagoda in the sky and shouted loudly, but his voice was full of joy. There is no such pagoda in the world without a foundation. Even if the heaven-connecting peak can reach the sky, its foundation is still deeply embedded in the earth. Xiao Hua replied with a smile. If you want to become almighty and move unhindered in the three realms, you have to first lay a good foundation. Humanity, emotions, and experience are all indispensable. This heaven and earth pagoda has no foundation, and Great Master's exquisite derivation pagoda also has no foundation. Green-robed Xiao Hua took the opportunity to kick up a fuss. Xiao Hua smiled and was about to speak, but his expression suddenly changed, and he said to Xiao Hua, "Oh right, fellow Daoist Confucian, when Great Master was attaining enlightenment, the heavenly devil said that this incomplete eldritch continent is in the turbulent flow of time. The Buddhist light of the Buddha realm cannot shine, and the devil nation has no passage to this place. Even the heavenly devil is trapped here. Then, why did fellow Daoist choose once you that day? If I'm not mistaken, Confucian cultivators should have divine abilities that Buddhists don't have. Fellow Daoist, please take care of it. We might not be able to leave this place without fellow Daoist's divine abilities. As Confucian cultivators say, one can't reach 1,000 miles without taking a few steps. If one wants to reach 1,000 miles, one can reach a higher level." The Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. "I've heard some news from the sage of literature, and I've also gained some insights in this regard. After we resolve the calamity in the primitive continent and leave the imperial palace, I'll work with fellow immortal Greenrobe and fellow immortal soul cultivator to improve the teleportation formation. Of course, since a female immortal from the immortal world left this place, we should have a chance." "Good." Xiao Hua nodded and looked at the 7th floor of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. A mysterious smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he said, "Now that the imperial court's matter has been settled, let's see what it is that requires the Metria Buddha Tsili to suppress." While speaking, Xiao Hua looked up again. Far away from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda, the heaven-swallowing beast was hiding behind a mountain range with the 9-toothed rake in its hand, looking very nervous. "Hehe, this little guy is probably scared out of his wits." Xiao Hua smiled and waved his hand. A large hand appeared out of thin air and covered the heaven-swallowing beast. The heaven-swallowing beast was very anxious and waved its 9-toothed rake to resist. "Don't be afraid," Xiao Hua said. "This old man has already killed the heavenly demon. Now, there are only a few of us left in the Imperial Heaven Tower. Besides, if this old man wants to kill you, why would I need to go through so much trouble?" The heaven-swallowing beast was already in awe of Xiao Hua. Now that it saw the space being sealed, it naturally had the intention and the ability to break this cage. However, after hearing Xiao Hua's words, it gave up on resisting. It only held the 9-toothed rake in its hand and was taken into the Heaven and Earth Pagoda with unusual vigilance. "Let's go." Xiao Hua looked at the heaven-swallowing beast's vigilance and said indifferently, "Although you are related to Deity and followed him into the Imperial Heaven Tower, you are also fated to be with this old man. Today, this old man will give you a share of the merit of saving the billions of lives in the primitive continent. This can be considered as living up to your Dharma name of Jie Kai." The heaven-swallowing beast was stunned and muttered a few words. However, in the end, it didn't say anything. After all, the scene just now was really frightening. The heaven-swallowing beast couldn't let down its guard for a while. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua, bone-tempering Xiao Hua, phoenix body Xiao Hua, and devil spirit Xiao Hua returned. Moreover, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua still activated the 9 cauldrons to suppress the Heaven and Earth Pagoda and opened the 7th floor of the pagoda. The pagoda turned into a pure white camellia flower. -14. Chapter 4262. 7 mysterious lights rushed out of the camellia, and the whole space was immediately enveloped by the 7 lights. All the light and shadows dimmed. When Xiao Hua's eyes fell on the source of the lights, he saw a Buddhist treasure that looked like 7 bamboo joints and 7 tree branches floating in the camellia. However, no matter what the illusion of the Buddhist treasure was, there were still 7 layers of extremely obscure waves that penetrated into the heaven and earth pagoda. Within these 7 layers of waves was an absolute space that no one's gaze or Buddhist consciousness could enter. The Tree of 7 Wonders. Body could not help but cry out in surprise. Why is it here? Is this what Maitreya Buddha's Kylie is suppressing? Master, you're wrong. Xiaohua's divine mind swept over and immediately understood. He smiled and said, this thing is the same as Pangu's axe. It's not the real Tree of 7 Wonders. It's just a shell or a shadow. Like Pangu's axe, it's a Buddhist treasure of Maitreya Buddha Lord. Maitreya Buddha Lord's Kylie is placed in the 8th level of the pagoda not to suppress this thing, but to control it. The 6th level of the pagoda under this thing is what the heaven demon of nirvana needs to suppress. Xiaohua raised his hand and grabbed. Sure enough, where his hand passed, the Tree of 7 Wonders turned into a shadow. Xiaohua could not hold the Buddhist treasure at all. Master. Xiaohua smiled and said, it seems that one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later. The Buddhist treasure will finally fall into your hand. I'm afraid that the multicolored light in the imperial palace that day was emitted by this thing. Dragon Vein Xiaohua and Phoenix Body Xiaohua looked at each other and said almost in unison, congratulations Grandmaster, congratulations. What's there to be happy about? Body shook his head slightly. Everything is just a reflection of the moon in the water. Only my Buddha is real. However, Body still chanted Buddhist mantras and came before the Tree of 7 Wonders. He raised his hand and held the Buddhist treasure. Namo Maitreya Buddha, Namo Maitreya Buddha. The Buddhist chant filled the whole space, and Body easily held the Tree of 7 Wonders in his hand. Ha ha, fate is too wonderful for word. Xiaohua laughed loudly. He knew very well that the heaven and earth pagoda itself was a unique treasure. It was used by the heavenly demon to support the reversal of space. Inside the heaven and earth pagoda, it was used to suppress the formation I of the innate heavy water flood formation. The heaven and earth pagoda was divided into 9 levels. Pangu's axe was on the 9th level, ancient Psyli was on the 8th level, and now the Tree of 7 Wonders was on the 7th level. He really could not figure out what better things were in the other levels of the heaven and earth pagoda. After putting away the Tree of 7 Wonders, Buddha Body continued to stand by the side. However, the Tree of 7 Wonders did not leave the heaven and earth pagoda. This was because there were strange waves rushing out from the 6th level of the heaven and earth pagoda, as if the whole pagoda was about to burst. What is this? Xiaohua frowned as he muttered in his heart, I actually have to rely on the wonderful Tree of 7 Treasures to suppress it. I won't release something that I can't control, right? Thinking of this, Xiaohua said to Body, Grandmaster, be careful. If there are any accidents, immediately activate the Buddhist treasure. Body smiled bitterly and said, don't worry, Tan Yu. As long as I can do it, I'll definitely do my best. Body's words naturally revealed his lack of confidence, indicating that he might not be able to control the Tree of 7 Wonders. However, Xiaohua still gritted his teeth and said, fellow immortal Confucian cultivator, open the 6th level of the pagoda. At worst, we'll destroy this inverted space and overturn the Great Formation. Fellow Daoist, your thinking is too simple. The green-robed Xiaohua was a formation grandmaster. He curled his lips and said, if we could break the formation like this, would we still need to break it layer by layer? Xiaohua stared at the heaven and earth pagoda with a solemn expression. When Xiaohua opened the 6th layer of the heaven and earth pagoda, the body of the pagoda transformed into the shape of an orchid. Xiaohua and the others were dumbfounded because there was nothing inside the orchid at all. The previous fluctuations had all disappeared without a trace. Strange. Xiaohua was greatly surprised. After his divine sense swept over, he opened his delirium destruction Dharma eye. However, before he could open it, a bewitching blue color instantly pierced into his Dharma eye, and even a cold and astringent feeling like a gust of wind was born from his Dharma eye. The origin of wind. Xiaohua was really ecstatic. He shouted almost without hesitation, fellow Taoists, we've struck gold. Quickly prepare. As he spoke, Xiaohua released his divine sense. Within the space, The origin of wood that had yet to be refined immediately spread out. Xiao Hua guided his fists into the orchid and slowly displayed the Big Dipper divine fist. Haha, great, great. This is what I like the most. The bone-honing Xiao Hua was the happiest. His figure also landed on top of Xiao Hua's head. Wind whooshed out of his fists as he displayed the fist technique together with his body. The Big Dipper divine fist that others couldn't learn no matter what was displayed by the two of them at the same time was truly dazzling. Like the other origins, the origin of wind didn't have any special resistance under the attraction of the starry sky fluctuations. It quickly entered Xiao Hua's body and tempered his body with the flow of the Big Dipper divine fist before finally entering the space. However, it was somewhat different from the other origins. As soon as the origin of wind entered the space, the entire space immediately produced a whistling sound. Then, the entire space seemed to be stretched, producing a strange change. Ayo, not good. Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. At this time, there were billions of living beings in his space. How could it tolerate the slightest bit of change? Almost without hesitation, Xiao Hua's divine sense entered the space. However, when Jade Archive Xiao Hua stood firmly in the space, his brows were tightly knitted together again. The entire space was indeed different from before, and it was very different. Everything in front of him was somewhat blurry and distorted. Even the appearance of the Fortune Gates disciples on the Shunhua mainland seemed somewhat unreal. However, other than this distortion, there were no other obvious changes. Not only were all the living beings growing normally, even the Hua Lishan's heavenly devil avatar that wasn't killed was bewitching some Fortune Gates disciples who had fallen into the devil path. Everything was no different from before. What is going on? Jade Archive Xiao Hua was truly puzzled. Could it be that there are changes in the space that even I don't know about? At this time, the green-robed Xiao Hua also came in from outside the space and asked curiously, "Fellow Daoist, why did you rush into the Shunhua mainland without any reason? What the hell happened?" Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled slightly and looked at the green-robed Xiao Hua's blurry and distorted figure, asking, "What? Don't you feel that there are some changes in the Shunhua mainland? Is that so?" The green-robed Xiao Hua looked around in bewilderment and asked curiously, "No? I didn't find anything different. Is everything exactly the same as before?" Jade Archive Xiao Hua asked. "Of course it's exactly the same, I really didn't find anything different." The green-robed Xiao Hua looked again and even moved his hands to attract lightning, carefully comprehending the power of lightning before answering. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked meaningfully at the space and nodded, saying, "Perhaps. I was thinking too much. Let's go, let's see what the wind origin is suppressing." Haha, is there still a need to say? The green-robed Xiao Hua flew out of the space with the Jade Archive Xiao Hua as he replied, "Previously, we had been guessing the origin of this innate heavy water. Now that even the origin of wind has appeared, the origin of wind must be suppressing the origin of water. This is the only way to explain how so much innate heavy water came to be." Xiao Hua's mind returned to its original position and his spirit shook. He clapped his hands and said, "Good, I also think so. If we have the water origin, our 5 elemental origins will be complete, and the light escape technique will enter a whole new level." Under everyone's gaze, the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua opened the 5th layer of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. Seeing the purple chrysanthemum in the pagoda, Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense and was overjoyed, because there was nothing in his divine sense. Moreover, there was a kind of heavy fluctuation in the entire chrysanthemum that went straight into the 4th layer of the pagoda. Wasn't this the water origin he was thinking of? However, when he opened his illusion breaker eyes, his eyes were filled with dazzling purple lightning patterns. Xiao Hua was absolutely dumbfounded. What? Why is it the lightning origin? Could it be that the water origin is in the 4th layer of the pagoda? Oh, I understand now. At this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly had a kind of enlightenment and said in surprise, "Fellow Taoists, do you still remember the white bones we picked up from the dozen or so big pillars under the lava where the stone giant was? Those white bones either had the power to kill with lightning or a fine penetrating power. They were all killed by the lightning origin and wind origin. They were probably killed by the wind and lightning because they wanted to collect these things. Xiao Hua was astonished when the lightning origin was revealed. Not only was there lightning vibrating on the pagoda, but the entire space was also shaken, and countless purple colors dyed the surrounding. Great Master, quickly make a move. Seeing the purple color in the illusion breaker eyes fly up like the rising sun, Xiao Hua was startled and hurriedly called out. Namo Metria Buddha. Buddha body chanted Buddha's name and raised the seven wonders tree to block it. However, just as he raised his hand, the Buddha's light on the golden body rapidly dimmed. Obviously, he couldn't activate the seven wonders tree. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and shouted, fellow Daoist tempered bones, let's attack together. Okay. Tempered bones. Xiao Hua saw the lightning origin and almost somersaulted in midair. Hearing Xiao Hua's order, he happily responded and rushed into the sky to activate the Big Dipper Divine Fist. Xiao Hua landed below the bone-honing Xiao Hua. While releasing the starry sky fluctuations, he also danced with the Big Dipper God Fist. When the thunder origin entered his body, Xiao Hua's body immediately felt like it was being smashed by a heavy hammer. His entire body was smashed apart inch by inch and then fused back together inch by inch. This was even more painful than the first time he introduced the fire origin. -14. Chapter 4263. Xiao Hua's days felt like years. He did not dare to faint casually, nor did he dare to let go of any trace of understanding. After all, the power of thunder was the most important of all the spells that he practiced. His understanding of the thunder vanquishing bead was still shallow. In the face of this thunder origin, he could only treat the feeling of not being able to live or die as an experience. However, when the thunder origin fell into the space, Xiao Hua's heart clenched again. His mind followed the thunder origin into the space, and an inexplicable premonition was born from the bottom of his heart. Rumble. The thunder origin fell into the starry sky, and the entire space was suffused with purple. At the same time, the green that had not completely disappeared before mixed with the purple. Immediately, there was a change that Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not expect. The previously blurred and distorted space was now being stretched by the power of wind and thunder. When the light and shadow stretched to a certain extent, the light and shadow rapidly shrank and returned to its original state in a moment. The power of wind and thunder seemed to have unloaded a heavy burden, and it continued to stretch until the entire space was stretched into another Shenhua continent. However, the Shenhua continent in this space was much smaller than the previous Shenhua continent, and everything inside was somewhat similar to what Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt before. Everything inside felt blurry and unreal. What's going on? Jade Archive Xiao Hua was dumbfounded. He saw that the space had actually given birth to another space. Waves of strange fluctuations rushed from the space into his mind, and a feeling of being at a loss arose spontaneously. When the strange fluctuations entered his body, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He hurriedly closed his eyes and sat cross-legged with his palms facing the sky, carefully perceiving the fluctuations. While Xiao Hua was comprehending the fluctuations, the changes in the entire space continued to develop. Besides this small space, 6 different spaces appeared around the Shenhua continent. These spaces were somewhat similar to the small space from before, but their sizes were different, and the colors of the spaces within were different as well. So much so that if the Jade Archive Xiao Hua opened his eyes, he would be able to see that the outer layers of these 7 spaces were all wrapped in a hazy luster, just like each and every one of the mysterious stars. Finally, a golden light flew up from Shenhua continent and landed on all the spaces. Only then did the shaking of the entire space stop. The entire space fell into a state of absolute stillness. The vibrations that came with the appearance of each space also stopped abruptly. The moment the spatial vibrations stopped, many star-like brilliances appeared in the adjacent spaces. These brilliances were somewhat dim and not particularly vivid. The changes in the space had ended, but the changes in the Shenhua continent had not. Many treasures and rare items had broken free from Xiao Hua's shackles. After disappearing in an extremely strange manner, they reappeared in different spaces. There were even many Fortune Gate disciples who had disappeared several times on the spot before slowly returning to their original state. However, this kind of change was caused by the will of heaven and earth. Everything in the space was in a state of stillness. The Fortune Gate disciples were unaware of this, and even Xiao Hua, who was meditating with his eyes closed, was unaware of this. As for the strange beasts and rare items that Xiao Hua had collected into his space, they had all fallen into the void along with the golden light. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Hua's eyelids moved and he opened his eyes. The moment his eyelids moved, the stillness of the entire space was broken, and everything began to move again. Xiao Hua was no longer on the original Shenhua continent. Instead, he was in a kind of void. He looked at the darkness around him, then at the space where Shenhua continent was, and then at the other spaces that had just appeared. He sighed and said, "Space, space. The so-called space naturally has emptiness first, then space. The 5 elements of heaven and earth are emptiness, and the power of wind and thunder is space. Only spaces with complete origin force can be considered real spaces." As he spoke, Jade Archive Xiao Hua gently waved his hand, and countless tiny spaces appeared in the void. With another wave of his hand, these tiny spaces were completely annihilated, and a terrifying destructive force was born from the birth and destruction of these spaces. This is the true power of space. Only by controlling the power of heaven and earth can one have such destructive power, Xiao Hua said with a wry smile. What is I's cultivation level now? What's the use of knowing these profound truths of heaven and earth? Jade Archive Xiao Hua's gaze swept across the various spaces again. He already understood everything inside. Finally, his gaze fell on Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao in the endless void. Previously, in the space where Shenhua continent was, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao had taken shelter in the starry sky. Now, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao had escaped from the starry sky of that space and landed in the endless void. His figure became increasingly ethereal and larger. Similarly, in the void, Xiao Hua of the Karma Hand had covered several spaces, and the Karma Hand was incomparably large. Everything will change, and everything will develop. Xiao Hua smiled faintly, and his figure landed in the space where Shenhua continent was. He thought to himself, previously, I thought that this was how the space was, but who would have thought that there would be such a change today? Heavenly Tao, oh heavenly Tao, when will it end? Oh! While flying, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao raised his eyebrows, and his figure stopped in midair. He looked at a star halo in the distance. The heavenly devil of freedom was actually reborn in that unformed space. Oh my, even the heavenly devil of joy was there. Sure enough, this devil can't be eliminated unless there is no more life in this world. However, the place where the heavenly devil of freedom and the heavenly devil of joy are. Is it the devil nation? Why hasn't that place formed yet? I don't care. With these 2 heavenly devils in I's space, the Fortune Gate's disciples can also pass the devil tribulation. Their cultivation is the real cultivation. I don't believe that the disciples who pass the heavenly devil's test can't be compared to the disciples of the hidden immortal continent or even the dawn rain continent. As Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao was thinking, the green-robed Xiao Hua's figure appeared in the space where Shenhua continent was. The moment the green-robed Xiao Hua appeared, he looked at the newly formed space in surprise, as if he had already sensed it. Oh, interesting. Seeing this, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao appeared beside the green-robed Xiao Hua in a flash. He smiled and asked, "Why did fellow Daoist come in?" Fellow Daoist. The green-robed Xiao Hua ignored Xiao Hua's question. Instead, he continued to look in the direction of the space and asked curiously, "What's going on? I didn't feel anything when I entered the space just now. Why did I find a place that made me feel a strange connection when I came in this time?" Oh! What strange connection did you discover with the place outside this space? Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao asked calmly. The green-robed Xiao Hua closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then, he said word by word, "I can't explain this connection. However, I feel that other than this Shenhua continent, there should be another place that I can go. It's like a home. Fellow Daoist, what's going on?" Hehe, fellow Daoist, if I can say, I will naturally say it. I feel that it's not too late to say it when you discover it. Xiao Hua of the Heavenly Tao replied mysteriously. The green-robed Xiao Hua smiled and said, fellow Daoist, it's up to you to say it. At this moment, the green-robed Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows again. With a wave of his hand, Xiao Gua appeared beside the two. Xiao Gua looked at the two dumbfounded. She didn't understand why two masters suddenly appeared. What's going on? Xiao Gua. The green-robed Xiao Hua asked. When Xiao Gua heard this, she immediately bowed and said while crying, Master, please know that our house has been robbed. Suddenly, a lot of spiritual herbs have been stolen. Ah! When the green-robed Xiao Hua heard this, he hurriedly looked at the herb field and then looked at the place he was worried about. Sure enough, his expression changed greatly. He looked at Xiao Hua of the Heavenly Tao with bright eyes and said, fellow Daoist, is there really a thief? Is it those heavenly demons? Hehe, don't worry. Xiao Hua of the Heavenly Tao smiled and said to the green-robed Xiao Hua and Xiao Gua, there are some changes in Shenhua continent. This is normal. Everything is under I's control. Master. Xiao Gua looked at the green-robed Xiao Hua with doubt. Whatever Master says. The green-robed Xiao Hua felt very bored and waved his hand. Just do your own thing. Go, Xiao Gua. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and patted Xiao Gua's head a few times. You did very well. Master saw everything. Yes, Master. Xiao Gua still couldn't tell which one was the real master. She simply bowed to the two of them and left. Let's go. Fellow Taoists must be waiting anxiously. Xiao Hua of the Heavenly Tao waved his hand and called the green-robed Xiao Hua out. What's the hurry? We just came in. The green-robed Xiao Hua muttered and flew out of the space with Xiao Hua of the Heavenly Tao. However, at this moment, he stroked his chin and said, right, there are some changes in the space. When we came in, it was a bit difficult. Did you do something? Xiao Hua smiled and didn't say anything. He had already sensed what the green-robed Xiao Hua said. The boundary of the space now was completely different from before. It was the endless void that was in contact with the outside world. It wasn't the original space that was directly in contact with the outside world. Even if a powerful expert discovered his own space, they could only enter the void first before discovering other spaces. Of course, the current Xiao Hua couldn't completely understand the connection between the spaces. Xiao Hua's mind returned to its original position. The group of doppelgangers looked at Xiao Hua and waited for his analysis. They seemed to have seen something from the green-robed Xiao Hua's excited face. Xiao Hua smiled and said, it's a long story. If fellow Taoists are interested, you can go and see for yourselves after leaving the Imperial Palace. At this point, Xiao Hua glanced at the dragon vein Xiao Hua and said thoughtfully, if I guessed correctly, fellow Daoist Longmai should be able to enter Shenhua continent this time. -14. Chapter 4264. Oh ho! Xiao Hua of the dragon vein shouted. He raised his head and let out a dragon roar above the heaven and earth pagoda. He seemed very happy. Then, without waiting for Xiao Hua to say anything, he immediately shouted, fellow Daoist, this poor Daoist can't wait any longer. Can this poor Daoist go in and take a look? Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the blooming chrysanthemum. He nodded and said, the fourth floor of the heaven and earth pagoda should contain the water source that we urgently need. With the help of wind and lightning sources, it should be able to produce more innate heavy water. If we can obtain the water source, then, the Shenhua continent will have all 5 elements. Who knows what changes will happen to the space? Forget it, fellow Daoist Longmai, you can try to enter. Good. Dragon vein Xiao Hua praised. His figure swayed and rushed into the space, while Xiao Hua's mind entered first. Sure enough, as Xiao Hua expected, this time, Xiao Hua entered the space very smoothly. However, to Xiao Hua's surprise, Xiao Hua didn't enter the Shenhua continent. Instead, he fell into another space above the Shenhua continent. Hey! What's going on? Jade Archive Xiao Hua was shocked. His figure flickered and he appeared above the continent. Fellow Daoist, is this the Shenhua continent? Dragon Vein Xiaohua was surprised to see such a barren space filled with rich origin energy. Where did our Fortune Gate's disciples go? Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at Dragon Vein Xiaohua and then at the space around him. He already understood that Dragon Vein Xiaohua was formed from the dragon cleansing liquid, which was an item from the dragon domain. Therefore, Dragon Vein Xiaohua's body was of a higher grade than ordinary dragons. He might be able to exist in a space like the hidden immortal continent, but he could not enter an incomplete space like the Shenhua continent. Now that Xiaohua's space had merged with the wind and lightning sources, there was a level to it. This space might be a higher grade space that could accommodate Dragon Vein Xiaohua. Similarly, the space that green-robed Xiaohua had sensed on the Shenhua continent was also a higher grade space. Feel it again, Xiaohua suggested. See if you can sense other spaces. Other spaces? Dragon Vein Xiaohua was stunned and said in surprise, Fellow Daoist, how many spaces are there here? Isn't there only one Shenhua continent? Naturally, there wasn't any in the past. But from today onwards, there will be, Xiaohua replied with a smile. Haha, congratulations fellow Daoist, congratulations fellow Daoist. Dragon Vein Xiaohua immediately understood and cupped his hands with a smile. The Jade Archive Xiaohua returned the greeting, congratulations to you, congratulations to you. Then, Xiaohua followed Xiaohua's instructions and carefully sensed his surroundings. Before long, he found the aura of the space where Shenhua continent was located. In the past, Xiaohua had been able to sense the Shenhua continent, but he had not been able to enter. Now that he had sensed it and activated his dragon chi, he was actually able to enter. However, it consumed a lot of dragon chi, and the space that came into contact with the Shenhua continent showed signs of collapsing. Because of this, Xiaohua didn't dare to stay for too long. After looking around a bit, he hurriedly left. How was it? The moment the green-robed Xiaohua saw Dragon Vein Xiaohua come out, he immediately asked. Avicania. Xiaohua of the dragon bloodline was actually keeping them in suspense. Xiaohua smiled faintly and simply passed on some of his insights into the advancement of space to these clones. It can't be. When the clones sensed what Xiaohua said, they were all stunned. After a moment, they were all beaming with joy. Our luck is actually so good. Previously, we shared a space, but now, each of our clones has a space. Xiaohua nodded and said, if nothing unexpected happens, it should be so. However, if you want to enter your own space, fellow Taoists, you all need to continue to work hard. Good. We understand. The clones replied in unison. Xiaohua and the other clones calmed down and said to the scholarly cultivator Xiaohua, scholarly fellow Daoist, you can release the water origin now. Okay. The scholarly cultivator Xiaohua responded and activated the Heaven and Earth Pagoda again, releasing the 4th level of the pagoda. After a graceful peony flower bloomed, wisps of green gas flew out from the peony flower and floated towards the surrounding space. Tai Wei green light. The scholarly cultivator Xiaohua was extremely familiar with this green light and immediately cried out, This is an innate jellyfish. When the clones heard this, they immediately looked towards the peony flower. Sure enough, a ball of water-blue green light was emitting brilliance from within, and endless amounts of Tai Wei green light fell into the 3rd level of the pagoda. Although an innate jellyfish was also an extremely rare thing in the world, Xiaohua's eyes clearly showed extreme disappointment. Compared to the water origin, the innate jellyfish was still too far away. Granny, I understand now. The green-robed Xiaohua cried out like a prophet. That heavenly demon didn't have the water origin in his hands, so he borrowed the power of wind and thunder to produce something similar to the water origin. Then, he used the innate jellyfish to turn this thing similar to the water origin into Tai Wei green light and sent it into the Great Formation. At this point, the green-robed Xiaohua stopped because the Grand Light Azure Light was the Grand Light Azure Light and not the Carnate Heavy Water. The Grand Light Azure Light could kill, but it couldn't create a flood like the Carnate Heavy Water. The green-robed Xiao Hua couldn't guess what was inside the third level of the pagoda that could turn Tai Wei green light into innate true water. Xiao Hua had used his mind to collect the innate jellyfish before, so it wasn't too difficult for him to do so now. However, this innate jellyfish clearly contained too much power of wind and thunder, and too much Tai Wei green light. It was abnormally heavy, so Xiao Hua had to spend a lot of effort to collect it. The green-robed Xiao Hua watched Xiao Hua collect the innate jellyfish, his eyes turned a few times, and he asked, "Fellow Daoist, our five elements wishful sky cudgel needs the innate mother of nature. Previously, we used the innate jellyfish and innate fire origin, so which one do we lack now? We still lack the innate mother of nature and the metal and wood elemental magnetism." Xiao Hua answered without hesitation, "These two things are still unknown. Previously, Xin gave us the information about the location of the wood and water elemental magnetism, but we already obtained it in the ruins, so we don't need to go there anymore. And the water origin." The bone-honing Xiao Hua reminded again, "Without the water origin, fellow Daoist can't cultivate the light escape technique." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and said, "The things we need for cultivation are all rare treasures in the world. Even the immortals of the immortal world would covet them. Fortunately, our luck is not bad, and we were able to wander to the upper realms like the ruins and the Great Desolation continent. Otherwise, who knows when we would be able to gather all these things? As for the things we lack, we don't need to worry, we can slowly look for them." Good. The bone-honing Xiao Hua obtained 3 origins at once, but he couldn't refine them in a short time. At this time, he naturally didn't have any objections and was the first to applaud. "Fellow Daoist, continue to open it." Xiao Hua instructed the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua, "I am already very curious, what exactly is inside the third layer, to actually be able to turn the Tai Wei green light into the innate heavy water." Not only was Xiao Hua curious, even the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua was also curious. However, when the third layer of the pagoda turned into a blood-red azalea flower and bloomed, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw the thing inside the azalea flower. Because inside the azalea flower, there was a complete set of golden dragon bones curled up, and an aura that made everyone prostrate themselves in worship overflowed from it. It forced everyone to retreat, and they couldn't even stand steadily in the air. And that almost endless amount of Tai Wei green light fell into the dragon mouth of this golden dragon bones and flowed out from the tail of the dragon bones. That goo-goo-goo sound of flowing into the second layer of the pagoda was precisely the innate heavy water. Close it first. Even Xiao Hua was unable to resist the dragon aura from the dragon bones. He descended from the sky and hurriedly ordered the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua. However, when the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua urged the heaven and earth pagoda to close the azalea flower, he discovered that he was unable to suppress the soaring dragon aura, and thus was unable to close the azalea flower. Damn it! This Hua la Heaven demon is definitely a genius. At this time, the green-robed Xiao Hua somewhat admired the Hua la Heaven demon. He was actually able to use the characteristics of these heaven and earth treasures to arrange a great formation, and forcibly create something out of nothing to make the innate heavy water appear. Now that we have slightly damaged it, it can't be restored to its original state. Since the heaven and earth pagoda had already been opened, the dragon aura from the dragon bones above the dragon god became more and more penetrating, gradually forming a dragon shape above the heaven and earth pagoda. And as this dragon shape became more and more plentiful, Xiao Hua and the others became more and more unable to stay for long, as if they would have to kneel before this dragon shape at any time. "Ayo!" At this time, dragon vein Xiao Hua exclaimed, This seems to be Ao Sheng." "What? Ao Sheng?" Xiao Hua stared blankly, trying his best to look at that blurry dragon shape, but it was useless. In his eyes, Ao Sheng was no different from Ao Jiao and Ao Yi. Only dragon vein Xiao Hua's dragon body and Little White's dragon body could be distinguished. Who cares if it's Ao Sheng or not? The golden light above the dragon bones was truly dazzling, and even through this dragon shape, it still pierced Xiao Hua's eyes, causing him to feel extremely uncomfortable. He angrily said, "If fellow Daoist has the means, why don't you hurry up and take this dragon bone? But if I take it, I won't be able to return it to Ao Sheng." Dragon vein Xiao Hua was somewhat hesitant, I can't be compared to Master Body, I can only beat dogs with meat buns. Bullshit. Xiao Hua angrily said, how can Ao Xing, this little brat, be compared to Liu Er? Hurry up and take this dragon bone. We won't leave a single hair for Dragon Island. Alright, then I will give it a try. I don't have much confidence. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, then said to Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua, who was also somewhat numb, fellow Daoist, help me. Alright. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua nodded, and according to Dragon Vein Xiao Hua's message, he did his best to close the azalea flower a little. When the azalea flower moved, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua also let out a long roar, releasing his dragon body, and landing on the azalea flower in the same position as the dragon god's dragon bone. Then, he inserted the dragon horn on his head into the gap of the azalea flower. -14. Chapter 4265. Wang Wang. The entire dragon horn let out a rumbling sound, and the countless dragon patterns on it fell into the azalea flower along with the dragon horn. The entire azalea flower also shook, and as the dragon patterns overflowed, the entire azalea flower also turned into a dragon shape. Pa pa pa. In just a moment, there was another burst of explosive sounds, and like bamboo being thrown into a fire pit, many dragon patterns flew out from the cracks of the azalea flower. Fellow Daoist. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua suddenly shouted, lend I 9 drops of essence blood. Ah! 9 drops. Xiao Hua opened his mouth in shock. Don't tell me you want I's life. Fellow Daoist, this is the dragon bone of the dragon god. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua's extremely tempting voice came, if you pass this village, you won't have this shop anymore. Today, fellow Daoist is unwilling to part with 9 drops of essence blood, but in the future, even if you have 90 drops of essence blood, you won't be able to find the dragon bone of the dragon god. Okay. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and agreed. When the 9 drops of essence blood fell into the azalea flower, Xiao Hua's face turned pale, and he almost couldn't stand in the air. Boom! A huge rumbling sound came from the azalea flower, and the dragon shape in the air turned blood red. Now is the time! Dragon Vein Xiao Hua roared, his body shrunk, and rushed into the azalea flower. However, in just a moment, the dragon breath that rushed into the sky slowly dissipated and fell into the azalea flower again. Roar! Dragon Vein Xiao Hua flew out from the azalea flower, his body was covered in golden light, and an uncontrollable dragon might rushed out of his body. Fellow Daoist. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua seemed to be unable to control his body, and he shouted, I can't continue to help fellow Daoist here, I want to enter the Shenhua continent to rest. Okay, you can go. Xiao Hua said, and released his consciousness to put Dragon Vein Xiao Hua into the space. Once Dragon Vein Xiao Hua left, the entire space immediately returned to its original state, and the clones all let out a long breath. Fellow Daoist, can you control this nation treasure? Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the mountain river seal, and asked Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smiled, this nation treasure originally belonged to my Confucian imperial power, of course I can control it. Needless to say, the heaven and earth pagoda is now under my control. As he spoke, the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua spat out a mouthful of true qi to stabilize the mountain and river seal. He looked at the innate heavy water that had already disappeared from the 3rd layer of the pagoda and said, taking away the dragon bone is already taking drastic measures. This great array no longer has an endless supply of innate heavy water. The catastrophe of the great desolate continent should have already been resolved. As for the 2nd level of the heaven and earth pagoda, there's no need to guess. It can only be the innate heavy water. Is there even a need to guess? The green-robed Xiao Hua snorted and said, anyone with eyes could see the innate heavy water flowing into the 2nd level of the heaven and earth pagoda. Now, what we need to guess is, what is being suppressed at the bottom of the heaven and earth pagoda? This. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua thought for a moment and shook his head. I can't guess. Let's take a look first. Xiao Hua frowned and instructed. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua opened the 2nd layer of the pagoda. Indeed, after a huge osman thus flower bloomed, the entire second layer of azure water waves appeared. Looking at the endless azure water waves, Buddha Bodhi mercifully shook his head and said, Namo Maitreya Buddha, if this innate heavy water fell into the great desolate continent, wouldn't it destroy the entire great desolate continent? Keep it. Xiao Hua looked around and saw that there were still many whirlpools appearing from time to time. He understood that the great desolate continent was still raining cats and dogs. He instructed Bodhi, the longer it stays, the more lives will be harmed. Bodhi smiled bitterly and said, this little monk's water bottle is already full of innate heavy water. I can't keep it anymore. This innate heavy water should be kept in the Shenhua continent by Tan Yu. No. The green-robed Xiao Hua hurriedly shouted, so much innate primordial water, the entire Shenhua continent can't contain it. Could it be that Master wants to flood the Shenhua continent? This Bodhi was also in a difficult position. He looked at Xiao Hua and said, Tan Yu can seal it in a place, right? Haha, there's no need for you to think too much. Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He thought of the space where Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was at now. That place was merely barren. There was no sea or ocean. Wasn't this innate heavy water exactly what that space needed? As for the harm this innate heavy water would do to the dragon race, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua would definitely not sit by and do nothing. He would definitely refine this innate heavy water into ordinary water. As he spoke, Xiao Hua released his consciousness and began to collect the innate heavy water. The green-robed Xiao Hua was still worried. He entered the space to check. When he didn't see any water droplets entering the Shenhua continent, he raised his head to look at the sky. He seemed to have thought of something. Daoist. Seeing Xiao Hua use his divine ability to collect the innate heavy water, Sky Devouring, who was watching from afar, couldn't help but fly closer. It knelt in mid-air and kowtowed. This little one represents the strange beasts of the great desolate continent to thank Daoist Zhenhun. If this little one has offended you in any way, please forgive me. Hee, get up. Xiao Hua flicked his sleeves and helped Sky Devouring up. He smiled and said, previously, you and I didn't understand each other. The so-called offending has already become a thing of the past. Yes, Daoist Zhenhun. Sky Devouring stood up with Xiao Hua's help and respectfully stood at the side. Its attitude was completely different from before. Xiao Hua was busy for less than an hour. The amount of innate heavy water in the Osmanthus flower didn't seem to have decreased by much. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly and raised his head to ask, Scholarly Cultivator, you can already control the heaven and earth pagoda. Can you directly send this innate heavy water to the Shenhua continent? This little one has yet to completely control the heaven and earth pagoda. Scholarly Cultivator Xiao Hua replied. Moreover, this little one has already tried. There is simply too much innate heavy water. This little one is unable to activate the heaven and earth pagoda. All of you come. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. If I only rely on myself, I don't know when I'll be able to collect it. Hee. The green-robed Xiao Hua laughed. He waved his hand and took out the Kunlun mirror. He said, we also don't have enough. Why don't we let the Fortune Gate's disciples come out and help? Great. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and laughed. I am used to fighting alone and have always neglected the strength of the Fortune Gate's disciples. Then, the green-robed Xiao Hua handed the Kunlun mirror to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua casually glanced at Sky Devouring, who was standing respectfully not far away. He took the Kunlun mirror and activated it, releasing the Fortune Gate's disciples one by one. The strength of the Fortune Gate's disciples couldn't be underestimated. They might not be able to escape the calamity of the desolate continent, but it wasn't a problem to get them to help collect the innate heavy water. Especially the Liu family's disciples. When they saw that they could do something for Xiao Hua, they all activated the divine ability of the Dragon Clan's descendants and collected the innate heavy water as if they were showing off. After Fujiwen and the others saw Xiao Hua, they directed their disciples to various parts of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda to collect the innate heavy water. When they finished distributing, they simply returned to Xiao Hua's side. Xiao Hua was quite happy to see that his disciples had become useful. However, when he glanced at Fujiwen, He seemed to have thought of something and frowned. He sent a voice transmission to Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua merely shrugged and shook his head. Although there were many Fortune Gate's disciples, there was too much innate heavy water in the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. With so many disciples, it took more than a month to collect all the innate heavy water in the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's second floor. Seeing that the innate heavy water was gradually drying up, a magic formation set up in the void appeared at the point where the second and first levels of the Heaven and Earth Pagoda came into contact. This magic formation exuded a kind of dragon's might, and the faint dragon patterns were mixed with some Buddhist light. Xiao Hua's divine thoughts revealed a wave that he was familiar with. Wasn't this the firmament formation that Xiao Hua had seen on the heaven connecting peak that day? Phew! Only now did Xiao Hua's heart completely calm down. He understood that this great formation was most likely the dragon formation that the dragon god knew about. He might not be able to break it with his strength. However, he had already taken away the innate heavy water. Even if this great formation was not broken, the apocalyptic disaster of the untainted land would become a thing of the past. After the innate heavy water dried up, the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's final floor was revealed. After Xiao Hua sent the Fortune Gate's disciples back to the Shenhua continent, he stroked his chin and looked at the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's body. Fellow immortal, Xiao Hua reminded, the desolate continent's calamity has been eliminated. Now, the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's final floor can be opened or not. What is fellow immortal's choice? What if I open it? Xiao Hua asked with interest. It's very simple. The Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua laughed. There is no such thing as perfection in this world. We have already done everything we could. We have also obtained the treasures we should have obtained. It is actually best for us to stop now. If I am not wrong, the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's final floor should be sealing the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's guardian. This thing could be a heavenly demon or some other demonic creature. If there is another heavenly demon on the desolate continent besides the heavenly demon, then this heavenly demon must be in the Heaven and Earth Pagoda's final floor. If we open this floor, it might be released. If we can't subdue it, then I don't need to say more about the outcome. Hee hee. Xiao Hua laughed and replied, in that case, why should we open it? Fellow immortal, you can put away this Heaven and Earth Pagoda, and we will leave the Imperial Heaven Court. What a pity. Xiao Hua's face was full of regret as he replied, I have already said that there is nothing perfect in this world. There is a guardian in this Heaven and Earth Pagoda, so I cannot take it away. Therefore, if we want to leave, we will have to abandon this Heaven and Earth Pagoda. Moreover, this Heaven and Earth Pagoda is the eye of the Heavenly Dome formation. If we don't take it away, this Heavenly Dome formation will always be there. Even. The green-robed Xiao Hua's face changed. We can't even leave, right? That's right. There is such a possibility. Xiao Hua nodded solemnly. After all, this great formation covers the entire desolate continent. Our teleportation array is also within this great formation. -14. Chapter 4266. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and suddenly turned to ask Sky-Swallowing Beast, Sky-Swallowing Beast, do you think I should open it or not? No. Sky-Swallowing Beast replied without hesitation. Xiao Hua asked with a smile, why? Sky-Swallowing Beast stared blankly and hurriedly explained, Disciple feels that there are so many powerful things in the pagoda. Those that can be used to guard the pagoda must be even more powerful than these things. Now that the disaster of the primitive continent has been resolved, why should we look for trouble? It's just like when this lowly one found a mud-curved beast to eat. I ate its body, but I had to discard the poisonous beast's head in the end. Otherwise, not only would I have to vomit out the body, even my own life would be in danger. You foodie, you only know how to eat. Xiao Hua laughed and scolded him. He turned to the green-robed Xiao Hua and Buddha body and said, Fellow Taoists, be on guard. If there is anything strange, feel free to attack. Fellow Daoist Confucian cultivator, prepare to open the last floor. Oh. Okay. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't listen to his advice and wanted to open the last floor, Xiao Hua was also helpless and prepared to open the last floor. Wait a moment. At this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly spoke again. He looked left and right and flew up, forming a triangle with the green-robed Xiao Hua and Buddha body. Finally, he didn't forget to tell Sky-Swallowing Beast behind him, Sky-Swallowing Beast, be careful. If there really is another heavenly demon, I won't be able to protect you. Sky-Swallowing Beast vigorously nodded and asked in a low voice, Daoist, can I not open the last floor? Of course not. Xiao Hua replied and raised his hands, holding the seal of turning the sea in his hands. He was very alert. When the green-robed Xiao Hua held the Tungjiao shears in his hand, Buddha body struggled to lift the tree of 7 wonders. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua glanced at Xiao Hua and activated the heaven and earth pagoda, opening the last layer of the pagoda. The purple datura flower bloomed strangely, and a gust of ghostly aura mixed with the aura of the netherworld rushed out of the datura flower. Within the ghostly aura, countless ghosts roared and wanted to rush out. Ha ha ha. Xiao Hua laughs and proudly says to Buddha body, did you see that? This is I's wise decision. Back then, I had seen the souls of strange beasts from the primitive continent flashing in the innate heavy water before disappearing. You all said that you had never seen it before. Look, it's not that you didn't see it before. It's just that it was absorbed into the heavenly demon's heavenly dome formation. Now, these ghosts belong to the Master. As long as the Master purifies these ghosts, who would dare to not give the Buddha fruit to the Master? Buddha body smiled and floated down from the sky. His face flickered from time to time, either Jiang Liua or Xiao Hua. He said mercifully, Namo Metria Buddha, Tanyu is right. As long as I obtain so much merit, not to mention the reincarnation of Namo Metria Buddha, even the reincarnation of Mahavirokana will not be able to snatch the Buddha fruit from me. Congratulations, Great Master, congratulations, Great Master. Today, you have finally achieved your goal. The green-robed Xiao Hua also cupped his hands and congratulated him. Ha ha ha, congratulations to you, congratulations to you. Buddha body laughed heartily. This is the Buddha fruit of my Namo Metria Buddha. As long as I'm still alive, I will never let anyone snatch this Buddha fruit. Suddenly, a somewhat timid but abnormally resolute voice rang out from behind Xiao Hua. Immediately after, a heaven and earth pagoda that was several feet tall appeared behind Xiao Hua. As soon as the heaven and earth pagoda appeared, the second layer of the pagoda was immediately controlled by it. Xiao Hua was shocked and hurriedly urged his Dharma power. However, the whole pagoda was imprisoned and his Dharma power could not be urged at all. Not to mention Xiao Hua, even the green-robed Xiao Hua and Buddha body were sealed in mid-air and could not move at all. Sky-Swallowing? Are you crazy? Xiao Hua was on top of the heaven and earth pagoda. Seeing the pagoda that he had mentioned before appear and that it was actually in Sky-Swallowing's hands, he immediately cried out in surprise and tried his best to urge the heaven and earth pagoda. Unfortunately, although the heaven and earth pagoda made a rumbling sound, the second layer of the pagoda did not change at all. Spiritual Master Xiao. Sky-Swallowing saw that he had the situation under control and did not dare to be negligent. He cried out, I didn't do it on purpose. This is you who forced me. As he spoke, Sky-Swallowing opened his mouth. Woo! A golden dragon flew out from his stomach and fell into the heaven and earth pagoda. Dragon crystal? You actually have the dragon crystal of the dragon god? Xiao Hua was shocked. At this point, how could he not know what Sky-Swallowing was going to do? Buzz. The moment the dragon crystal fell into the heaven and earth pagoda, the whole pagoda immediately made a rumbling sound. Then, the pagoda turned into a huge dragon. This dragon was exactly the same as Ao Sheng, but this Ao Sheng's face was ferocious. The dragon horn on his head flashed a cold light. That overwhelming dragon power filled the second layer of the heaven and earth pagoda, firmly covering Xiao Hua, the green-robed Xiao Hua, and body. Then, the dragon-shaped Ao Sheng gave a strange smile. On his face, there was a smile that was similar to the smile of the heavenly demon. He crazily pounced on Xiao Hua's back. Boom! Xiao Hua's back shone with a myriad of light like the rising sun. He wanted to resist the attack of the dragon-shaped pagoda, but this light was instantly annihilated by the dragon horn. Even Xiao Hua's body was crushed like paper under the power of the dragon crystal and the heaven and earth pagoda, turning into thousands of fragments that scattered in the air. With the fall of Xiao Hua, the green-robed Xiao Hua and bodies' faces changed greatly. Their bodies shook a few times and turned into flowing light, rushing into the blooming purple datura flower in the heaven and earth pagoda. Damn it! Xiao Hua cursed. He was about to escape, but after flying for a moment, he also turned into a ray of light and fell into the datura flower. Alas! Seeing that Xiao Hua had fallen and all his doppelgangers were killed by him, Sky Swallowing's face turned pale. He raised his head to look at the empty second layer of the heaven and earth pagoda, then he looked at the heaven and earth pagoda that had turned into a dragon. He sighed and knelt down at the place where Xiao Hua had fallen. He kowtowed to the flesh and blood and said, "Spiritual Master, this little one knows that you have done a lot to save the billions of creatures in the Eldritch continent. You are the savior of all the creatures in the Eldritch continent. Moreover, you have been really good to this little one. This little one really likes the weapon you have given to this little one. If you had not uncovered the last layer of the pagoda, this little one would definitely not have made a move. However, since you've decided to unveil the pagoda and fight for merits with Namo Metria Buddha, destroying his path of survival, today, for the sake of Namo Metria Buddha, I have no choice but to launch a sneak attack on Enlightened Master. This little one will pay for Spiritual Master's life. I will use the weapon Spiritual Master gave to this little one to end my life. I hope that after this little one reincarnates, I can be Spiritual Master's mount to repay Spiritual Master's kindness." As he spoke, Sky Swallowing raised his hand and picked up the nine-toothed rake. He closed his eyes and clenched his teeth, as if he was extremely afraid of pain, and hit himself on the top of his head. However, what was extremely strange was that the nine-toothed rake seemed to be illusory. When it hit Sky Swallowing's head, it simply flashed past. "Ah! What is going on?" Sky Swallowing opened his eyes and looked at the nine-toothed rake in his hand in bewilderment. He then touched his head and asked curiously, "Am I already dead? Didn't I hear that death is very painful?" As he said that, he hugged her a few more times with the back of his hand. "Ien, it seems that you are really dead. If that is the case, then I have not let Spiritual Master Xiao down." Sky Swallowing's pale face showed a trace of relaxation and a smile. "Ha ha ha." Suddenly, a kind of laughter rang out in the previously silent heaven and earth pagoda. Sky Swallowing turned pale with fright. He raised his head and saw that not only was Xiao Hua's figure facing him in perfect condition, but there was also a trace of a smile on his face. Even the green-robed Xiao Hua, Buddha body, and Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua were standing in their original places without any injuries at all. You. Sky Swallowing was puzzled. He then realized and said with a smile, "So you have also arrived here a step earlier." Then, he knelt in front of Xiao Hua and kowtowed, "Spiritual Master, don't blame this little one for being ruthless. It is only because this little one has been under Buddha Metria since young. He often taught this little one, and this little one is willing to do anything for Buddha Metria. The last floor of this heaven and earth pagoda is the last guarantee for Buddha Metria's enlightenment. If Spiritual Master took them away, Buddha Metria would really have no way to live, so this little one could only take action." Hearing this, Xiao Hua looked at Sky Swallowing with a smile that was not a smile and said, "In that case, this old man has slightly forgiven you. This little one does not care. I beg for Spiritual Master's forgiveness." Sky Swallowing did not dare to get up and said sincerely, "This little one only hopes to be Spiritual Master's mount after reincarnation to atone for the sins of my previous life." Xiao Hua looked at Sky Swallowing thoughtfully and asked, "Who gave you the dragon crystal that you used to attack this old man? Let this old man see. This little one found that in Chao Tian Imperial Court." Sky Swallowing raised his head and answered honestly, "And that small pagoda? That thing has already been left in Chao Tian Imperial Court. How can this little one take it out?" "You can try. It is said that the dragon crystal of the dragon god can be reincarnated with the soul," Xiao Hua said. "Okay." Sky Swallowing opened his mouth. Wang. The dragon crystal was spat out from his mouth again. As soon as the dragon crystal entered the air, it immediately emitted a golden brilliance. This brilliance was once again in the shape of Ao Shung's dragon. Ah! This. Seeing the dragon crystal like this, Sky Swallowing's face suddenly revealed a kind of surprise. He was actually not stupid, nor was he stupid. It was just that because he attacked Xiao Hua earlier, his conscience was quite guilty. Moreover, when Xiao Hua suddenly appeared, he felt a kind of shame that he did not have the face-to-face, so he lost his mind. At this moment, seeing the dragon crystal as dazzling as before, he immediately came to his senses. However, just as he came to his senses, he heard a dragon roar. Roar! Then he saw an even more dazzling golden light flash by, and then a soaring dragon breath flashed in front of his eyes. The entire world returned to its calm state, and the dragon crystal in front of him had long disappeared. -14. Chapter 4267. That's not right. Seeing this, heaven-devouring beast immediately jumped up from the ground and exclaimed, This isn't the netherworld. Heh. At this time, a voice sounded behind heaven-devouring beast, Of course this isn't the netherworld, this is just an illusion to test you. Heaven-devouring beast turned around in shock. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua was standing there in the distance with an indifferent expression. On his shoulder was a colorful mirage butterfly. Illusion. Heaven-devouring beast's face turned ashen. He opened his mouth again as if wanting to spit out the Son of Heaven and Earth pagoda, but thinking that the dragon crystal was no longer there, how could the pagoda harm Xiao Hua? In fact, even if he still had the dragon crystal now, how could he hurt Xiao Hua? How did you know? Heaven-devouring beast's gaze fell on the first layer of the Datra flower and looked at the ghost inside. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. He was really unwilling to accept this, so he asked absent-mindedly. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at heaven-devouring beast. He was secretly happy in his heart. He didn't want to lie to heaven-devouring beast at all. If he really wanted to trick heaven-devouring beast, couldn't he just create an illusion? But he didn't expect that as soon as he appeared, heaven-devouring beast would confess without being pressed. So Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and pushed the boat with the current, and made heaven-devouring beast's dragon crystal go away. Of course, Xiao Hua didn't care whether this was heaven-devouring beast's cunning trick or not. Because when heaven-devouring beast used the nine-toothed rake to hit his head, Xiao Hua had already made a decision in his heart. Xiao Hua smiled and said, It's actually very simple. Heaven-devouring beast doesn't have any magical powers, he only relies on bewitching others. Who hung the Pangu axe on heaven-connecting peak? Who placed the Chao Tiank's weapon and crystal? Who placed the Buddha and dragon statues worshipped by the stone giants and other prehistoric beasts on the primitive continent? All signs point to the fact that heaven-devouring beast is only the mastermind behind the scenes. He has a spokesperson in front of the stage. Who is this person? The heaven-devouring beast and Deity were not suitable because they were much stronger. Moreover, they were extremely loyal to Lord Dragon God and Metria Buddha. Hua la heavenly demon could not make use of them. Of course, it wasn't that the heavenly fiend didn't have the ability to do so. However, from what the heaven-devouring beast and truth listener said and did, they didn't know of the heavenly fiend's existence. In fact, they were key to the heavenly fiend's other plans. Previously, I also suspected that it was the primordial 5 little ones. After all, they are stronger than you. Furthermore, they are more arrogant and easily controlled. However, when I get the Imperial Heaven Tower and you're the only one here, do I still need to suspect anyone else? Moreover, fellow immortal Confucian cultivator said clearly that this Heaven and Earth pagoda is a mother-child pagoda. Now that we've reached the bottom, we still haven't seen the child pagoda. How could I not know that the magic tool you used to attack me was the child pagoda? However, I never expected you to have the dragon crystal of the dragon god. Damn it, why didn't I find out earlier that you had a dragon crystal? Otherwise, why would there be so many changes? At this point, Xiao Hua asked curiously, That's right, sky-devouring beast, how did you end up hanging the Pangu axe on the Tongtian Peak? At that time, didn't you know what the Tongtian Peak was for? When the Tongtian peak collapsed, the flood fell from the sky. What were you thinking? Sky-devouring beast hesitated for a moment before answering. The Pangu axe was placed on the Heaven and Earth Child Pagoda. However, at that time, I didn't know that it was placed on the Tongtian peak, but inside the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. Therefore, I never knew that there was a Tongtian peak on the primordial continent. At that time, when I saw the Pangu axe on the Tongtian peak, I was also dumbfounded. When the Tongtian peak collapsed and the flood fell, I didn't think too much about it. I didn't know if the flood would be able to kill all the living things in the primordial continent. Only when Daoist Master mentioned it did I understand. How did the treasure inside the Heaven and Earth Pagoda get placed? Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua asked. This is not something that I can know. Sky-devouring beast said in a low voice, when I came here, I only knew that there were 2 identical pagodas. Afterwards, the sky-devouring heavenly demon told them everything it knew. Xiao Hua and the others roughly understood that besides the sky-devouring heavenly demon, there were many other exotic beasts in the Elysium continent. Of course, before the sky-devouring heavenly demon, the sky-devouring heavenly demon had done the same. However, this time, it was unknown whether it was Paradise Devil's luck or misfortune, but he finally realized all his plans. Unfortunately, he met Xiao Hua again. After sky-devouring beast finished speaking, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and said, "Give me the Son of Heaven and Earth Pagoda." Yes. Sky-devouring beast didn't dare to be negligent. It opened its mouth and spat out the Son of Heaven and Earth Pagoda. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua raised his hand and immediately took the Son of Heaven and Earth Pagoda in his hand. Next, 9 province cauldron spat out air and chi into the Son of Heaven and Earth Pagoda, cleansing it. He looked up at Xiao Hua and said, "Good, fellow immortal, this Son of Heaven and Earth Pagoda doesn't have an avatar of Paradise Devil." Then, Xiao Hua said coldly, "What is Paradise Devil's plan? How could he give himself away in such a small matter? If there is no accident." Then, Xiao Hua pointed at sky-devouring beast and said, "This foodie also doesn't have an avatar of Paradise Devil." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua didn't feel reassured. He also used air and chi on sky-devouring beast. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua behind sky-devouring beast smiled and said, "The best way to control a person is to subtly influence their faith and make them believe that everything they do is true. Using an avatar to control their mind is a bad idea. Paradise Devil wouldn't do such a thing." Sure enough, Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua didn't find anything strange about sky-devouring beast. "Sky-devouring beast, you haven't answered what this old man asked you earlier." Xiao Hua stared at sky-devouring beast and asked, "When you knew that what you did could destroy the Great Desolation continent and kill billions of creatures, did you regret it?" "Speaking of regret, it's not like this little one didn't." Sky-devouring beast replied, "However, this little one only regretted it for a moment. After all, it was for the survival of Metria Buddha. This little one doesn't regret anything. This little one is willing to do anything for Metria Buddha." Another extremely ignorant idiot. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua scolded without pity. "Actually," Xiao Hua said word by word, "long before you made your move, this old man had already warned you. However, you turned a deaf ear and actually still wanted to make your move. If this old man didn't see the opportunity early, I'm afraid that this old man would really be like these billions of ghosts, struggling bitterly here without being able to escape. Yes, this little one thinks about it now. At that time, Daoist Master did indeed warn me." Sky-devouring beast smiled bitterly and said, "However, at that time, this little one was wholeheartedly thinking about Metria Buddha and didn't care. Fellow Taoists, what do you think?" Xiao Hua looked up at his clones with a smile that wasn't a smile. However, Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and the others all smiled but didn't say anything. Only Bone-tempering Xiao Hua said at the top of his voice, "Since fellow Daoist has already made a decision, why do you still need us to say anything?" Alas. Xiao Hua sighed, looked at sky-devouring beast and said, "This old man has already given you many chances, but in the end, you still chose to attack this old man. Logically speaking, this old man should also take your life. Yes, this little one knows." At this time, Sky-devouring beast's life was already in Xiao Hua's hands. How could he dare to say anything? However, after you sneak attacked this old man, you immediately chose to kill yourself. This really surprised this old man. Therefore, this old man is a little embarrassed to deal with you. Xiao Hua changed the topic and said again, after all, you didn't hurt this old man at all. If I killed you, it would seem that this old man is narrow-minded. Moreover, you attacked for the sake of Maitreya Buddha's survival. This old man admires this belief. However, if I didn't attack you, I would punish you, right? This old man is somewhat unwilling in his heart. Tell me, how should this old man deal with you? This little one attacked Enlightened Master and deserves 10,000 deaths. Everything is up to Enlightened Master to deal with. Sky-devouring beast had long heard that Xiao Hua would not take his life. At this time, how could he not know how to take advantage of the situation to get off the donkey? He hurriedly answered respectfully. How about this? Xiao Hua said, you already said previously that you're willing to do anything for Maitreya Buddha. Is this true? Of course. Sky-devouring beast nodded vigorously. This little one would rather offend all the living beings in the Primeval continent than be willing to let Maitreya Buddha's Buddhist light suffer any harm. Good then. Do you still remember what this old man said to the heaven-devouring beast previously? Namo Maitreya Buddha has actually already reincarnated. Xiao Hua had just opened his mouth to speak when he was immediately interrupted by Sky-devouring beast. He said in surprise, this. How is this possible? Maitreya Buddha is already a Buddha Lord. How can he possibly reincarnate? This little one thought that you were deceiving the heaven-devouring beast previously. Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at Sky-devouring beast, saying, do you think this old man is someone who deceives people? No, no. Sky-devouring beast hurriedly changed his words. Then what does Daoist Master mean? You're helping the Avildor, helping the Hua la heavenly devil destroy the world. You've already been tainted with boundless karma. Now, you no longer have the face to stay in the Primeval continent. Rather than being beaten to death by the Primeval continent's 5 little ones in the future, why don't you leave with this old man? Xiao Hua said his plan. This old man will bring you to see your family's Maitreya Buddha Lord. You can stay by his side to protect him. Firstly, it's to atone for your sins. Secondly, it's also this old man's punishment for you. How is this possible? Sky-devouring beast said anxiously, even if Maitreya Buddha Lord reincarnated, his magic power is still boundless. How is this possible? Buddha body smiled and interrupted Sky-devouring beast, saying, if that Maitreya Buddha had the power to protect himself, why would this poor monk snatch his Buddha fruit? Now that you have the opportunity to protect him and help him obtain Buddha fruit again, you might be able to mix in with the Buddha fruit like an envoy or arhat in the future. Wouldn't that be better than being cursed by the people of this Primeval continent? Daoist Master. Sky-devouring beast knelt on the ground again and kowtowed with tears streaming down his face, saying, how is this punishing this little one? This is simply helping this little one. This little one has a great ambition since young and is willing to protect Maitreya Buddha. What you want this little one to do is precisely this little one's lifelong wish. -14. Chapter 4268. Heaven-devouring beast, get up. Xiao Hua smiled. How could this old man not know about your narrow-mindedness? However, since you also have a great wish in your heart, this old man can't not fulfill your wish. Yes, Daoist. Heaven-devouring beast hurriedly got up and obediently stood at the side. This old man will keep you in the Kunlun mirror. When we return to this old man's world, I will release you. Xiao Hua took out the Kunlun mirror and said, however, your origin, when we return to this old man's world, don't mention it again. Otherwise, this old man won't even need to find trouble with you. Other greedy cultivators will also make an example out of you. I believe you understand the trick of this better than this old man. If heaven-devouring beast was stupid, how could happiness-melting heavenly demon choose him? On the contrary, heaven-devouring beast looked simple and honest. but its heart was very cunning. How could it not know the importance of the matter Xiao Hua was talking about? It hurriedly replied, "Yes, this little one understands." "Good. Don't resist, this old man will keep you first." While speaking, Xiao Hua shook the Kunlun mirror and kept heaven-devouring beast into its space. Seeing this, Buddha body praised, "Namo Metria Buddha, Tan Yu's action is really killing two birds with one stone." "Ari, don't praise I anymore." Xiao Hua kept the Kunlun mirror and said, "If not for heaven-devouring beast's sincerity towards Namo Metria Buddha, I would have already killed it." After speaking, Xiao Hua rubbed his hands and looked at the purple datura flower with fervent eyes. He asked Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua, "Fellow Daoist, how many ghosts are there in here?" "Countless." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's tone was somewhat gloomy. "Other than the living beings that were killed in this calamity, there are many that were killed in the past. Namo Metria Buddha." Buddha body couldn't help but chant Buddha's name. He put his palms together and his face was filled with boundless benevolence. Heavenly demon, in the end, he is still a heavenly demon. Xiao Hua's heart suddenly sank and a bitter taste appeared in his mouth. He turned to Buddha body and said, "Master, do you think you want to transcend them? Or do you want I to lead them into the netherworld? Is there a difference?" Buddha body smiled bitterly. "Furthermore, with so many ghosts, how long will this poor monk transcend them?" "All right." Xiao Hua nodded and no longer held back. He released his consciousness, and the netherworld origin force also rushed into the bottom level of the heaven and earth pagoda. Countless ghosts were sucked into Xiao Hua's dimension along with the netherworld origin force. Because the space had already changed, Xiao Hua's mind also fell into the space along with these ghosts. Thus, another strange scene puzzled Xiao Hua. However, these ghosts did not fall into the dark side of the Shenhua continent. Instead, they rushed into the golden light high up in the sky. It was as if there was a dark side of the space in the shadow of the golden light. Xiao Hua was shocked as he followed the ghost into the shadow of the golden light. However, something even more inexplicable happened. The ghost landed on the yin side of Shenhua continent, but the position was slightly different. When he landed near the nether lotus and flew out of the yin side of the space, he found himself in the space of Shenhua continent. Could it be that the yin side of every space is the netherworld? And every netherworld is a part of the real netherworld? Xiao Hua pinched his chin and pondered as he looked at the various spaces in the endless void. Although Xiao Hua's mind and netherworld origin force were strong, it still took Xiao Hua more than 10 days to collect all the ghosts that the happiness-melting heavenly devil had been collecting for so many years. When the ghosts at the bottom level were all gone, the purple datura flower trembled and closed again. Then, the osman thus, azaleas, peonies, chrysanthemums, orchids, camellias, lotus, and plum flowers closed one after another. The complete heaven and earth pagoda appeared in front of everyone again. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua first put away the mountain and river seal, then he raised his hand and patted the 9 provinces' cauldrons. The 9 provinces' cauldrons let out a rumbling sound and turned into a giant 9-colored hand that fell on top of the heaven and earth pagoda. As Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua urged his true energy, the heaven and earth pagoda let out a loud rumbling sound and was pulled out from the ground by Xiao Hua. As the heaven and earth pagoda flew out, the entire inverted space trembled violently. "Collect." Finally, Xiao Hua patted his own head, and his 5-colored true qi turned into a huge cloud that covered the 9 continents' cauldrons and the heaven and earth pagoda. With a roar, he absorbed them into his body. Catcher! As soon as the heaven and earth pagoda disappeared from the inverted space, the second level of the heaven and earth pagoda cracked like glass. Then, cracks appeared in the void. As soon as these cracks appeared, they immediately spread in all directions, and a large area of the void collapsed in these cracks. Boom boom! Looking at the countless cracks in the void, Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He understood that the heaven and earth pagoda was the eye of the great world-destroying formation. Now that Xiao Hua had absorbed the heaven and earth pagoda, the great world-destroying formation was also completely destroyed. These cracks in the void were the signs of the formation's collapse. But right at this moment, a fist-sized black hole suddenly appeared above the heads of Xiao Hua and the others, where the previous spatial barrier was. Whether it was the normal space from before or the inverted space now, everything within it surged towards the black hole. Everything, whether it was boulders, mountains, trees, etc., turned into light and shadow and fell into the black hole. Moreover, when the light and shadow of the two spaces collided, it emitted an indescribable fluctuation, and a violent aura was emitted from the black hole. Not good. Xiao Hua scanned with his divine sense and immediately understood that this black hole was the starting point of the two spaces. Previously, when the heavenly demon was setting up the formation, everything was born from it. But now, the formation was going against the flow, and everything was going to be destroyed. Xiao Hua and his doppelgangers were also inside, so they would inevitably be annihilated in this black hole. Damn it, the heavenly demon actually left a trick here. Xiao Hua was shocked and hurriedly recalled his doppelgangers. Then, he activated the Kunlun mirror. The Kunlun mirror's light beam entered the void, and an abnormal distorted void passage appeared. Xiao Hua did not hesitate to escape into it. When Xiao Hua came out of the distorted space, he stepped into the sky above the imperial palace. At this moment, the rain that filled the sky had stopped. The space above the dome of heaven shattered, and in a moment, it was restored. The blazing sun was also hanging in the sky. Ha ha! Xiao Hua laughed. Then, he scanned with his divine sense and said, everything is done. As long as this innate heavy water disappears, the great desolate continent will return to the great desolate continent of the past. Just as Xiao Hua finished speaking, boom! A huge explosion came from below him. Then, a towering water pillar appeared again. Xiao Hua hurriedly teleported away. When the water pillar fell, a huge whirlpool appeared at the location of Chao Tianqiu. Xiao Hua scanned with his divine sense and immediately understood that after the black hole destroyed the two spaces, it produced a huge explosion, and a huge abyss was born under the ground. What a pity! Xiao Hua recalled his divine sense and said regretfully, this abyss is still not big enough to absorb the innate heavy water of the great desolate continent. However, before Xiao Hua's regret disappeared, Xiao Hua suddenly patted his forehead and said with a smile, what is this? Since there is such an abyss, who cares about its size? After saying that, Xiao Hua activated the water escape technique and went to the bottom of the abyss. He sat down cross-legged and released his divine sense again, absorbing the innate heavy water near him into the space. As the saying goes, water flows to the lower places. There was such a bottomless abyss in the great desolate continent. How could the innate heavy water not flow here? After an unknown amount of time, when all the innate heavy water of the great desolate continent fell into the abyss, the whirlpool above the abyss that never stopped rotating began to slow down. Finally, the innate heavy water in the abyss disappeared, revealing Xiao Hua, who was sitting cross-legged at the bottom of the abyss. Perfect! Xiao Hua collected the last of the innate heavy water and stood up with a smile. He clapped his hands and seemed to be talking to himself. Just when he was about to fly away, he smiled again and looked at the sky above the abyss. Master! At this time, 5 huge shadows appeared under the sun. One of the shadows in front cried out in surprise. Aren't they the great desolate 5 little ones? What did I say? How could the apocalypse of the great desolate continent be so easily eliminated? So it was Master who did it. The black jade Chelene was somewhat incoherent with excitement. He shouted in the air, if we didn't chase in the direction where the flood disappeared, we wouldn't know the truth. Xiao Hua flew out of the abyss and looked at the excited black jade Chelene and the other great desolate 4 little ones. Although most of the scales of these 5 great desolate beasts were damaged, the brilliance on their bodies was also dim, and they looked very miserable. The joy between their brows was obvious. Xiao Hua didn't say much. He first asked about the situation of the great desolate continent. When the great desolate 5 little ones roughly explained the situation, Xiao Hua unconsciously frowned. The situation was far beyond his imagination. He still underestimated the power of the great demonic world annihilation formation. Although he almost didn't stop to find the flaws of the great formation and then broke it without much delay, many strange beasts still died in the great desolate continent. Even the great desolate 5 little ones would have turned into white bones if they didn't use that mysterious formation to resist the flood together. Xiao Hua released his divine sense and looked at the great desolate continent within tens of thousands of li. At this time, the great desolate continent was completely different from before. Those huge mountains and huge rocks were mostly corroded by the innate heavy water. Those towering peaks were no longer there. Everything looked similar to the scenery of the hidden immortal continent. However, the heaven and earth origin chi in his divine sense was still abundant. The water origin chi of heaven and earth origin chi was even denser than the other four. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this great desolate continent was restored to the great desolate continent full of vitality. -14. Chapter 4269. After carefully sizing up the 5 little ones, Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the ink jade Cheline. He said with a smile, "Ink jade Cheline, I might leave this place very soon. You promised me before that wherever I go, you'll follow me. Do you still keep your word?" This. The ink jade Cheline didn't expect Xiao Hua to ask this as soon as they met. He unconsciously hesitated, but a moment later, he resolutely replied, "Master, after this apocalyptic flood, I know what is called sincere unity and helping each other in the same boat. Therefore, I'm unwilling to leave them. If old master insists on this lowly one following, this lowly one will definitely follow without any complaints. However, if old master can show mercy and bring all of them along, that would be for the best." "Hehe, why would I bring you along?" Xiao Hua smiled. "Now that the great disaster of the wilderness has just passed, there are many things waiting to be done. You're the 5 little ones, how can you leave the wilderness? Forget it, forget it. Let the agreement between you and this old man go up in smoke. I only hope that you can restrain your unruly character in the future and treat the weak creatures of the wilderness well. Thank you, master." The ink jade Cheline was overjoyed. He knelt down in front of Xiao Hua and thanked him endlessly. The gold toad, multicolored peacock, black tortoise and black sky white tiger were also happy and knelt down. Seeing the 5 little ones thanking him, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "It's rare for you all to be enlightened. As the saying goes, a prodigal's son is better than gold. Today, I'll also give you some benefits." With that, Xiao Hua raised his hand, and a crystal light appeared on his fingers. Then, as if he had grown 5 arms, 5 similar fingers fell on the foreheads of the 5 little beasts of the great desolation. Boom! The ink jade Cheline and the others felt their vision go dark. Countless wilderness catalogue poured into their minds like a tide. They were shocked and hurriedly closed their eyes to comprehend. Xiao Hua waved his sleeve and moved the 5 little ones to the ground. Then, he turned into the wind and floated away. After several tens of days, when the 5 little ones woke up, where was Xiao Hua? What the 5 young ones of the primordial world did not expect was that Xiao Hua had once again arrived at the heaven-reaching peak. Looking at the collapsed Tongtian Peak, the mountain looked like the backbone of a defeated hero. Its unyielding and indestructible aura was still emanating from it under the scorching sun. The strange beasts of the eldritch continent did not dare to get too close to it. Xiao Hua could not help but sigh and say, Tongtian Peak was originally innocent, but it fell into the hands of the heavenly demon of the eldritch continent. It was a grave sin. The entire eldritch continent was almost destroyed because of Tongtian Peak. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. Heaven-connecting peak is the crystallization of the heart's blood of billions of stone giants. They also used their lives to build it. If he were to be placed in the Yorwild's continent, he would most likely be treated as a pillar of shame. No one knows what will happen in the future. The material of the heavens connecting peak seems to be very strange, and the refining method is also very mysterious. It's not something that I can see through. Green-robed Xiao Hua's eyes were also shining. Moreover, under the innate heavy water, everything in the eldritch continent was corroded. Only Tongtian Peak was not damaged in the slightest. This thing should be of great use. Actually, Phoenix body Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment and suggested, the material needed to refine the 5 elements wishful heaven connecting staff doesn't seem to be something like Tongtian Peak. However, since it's a divine object made by heaven, we shouldn't waste it. We might as well collect it first and see if it's useful in the future. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He wrapped his mind around Tongtian Peak and tried to collect it. He shook his head and said, "This thing was refined by the heavenly demon divine ability. Its weight has long exceeded I's ability. It's impossible to collect it in a short time. What a pity." The doppelgangers all felt that it was a pity. Just as Xiao Hua turned and was about to fly away, Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and Buddha Body suddenly spoke at the same time. "Fellow Daoist, don't worry, oh?" Xiao Hua stared blankly, then said with a smile on his face, "Could it be that you two fellow Taoists have a way?" Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and Buddha Body flew to Tongtian Peak. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua first released his origin sense, sweeping from the top to the bottom of Tongtian Peak, while Buddha Body released his Buddhist sense from the bottom to the top. After the two doppelgangers finished their inspection, they looked at each other and smiled. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua flew in front of Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Congratulations, fellow Daoist. Although this Tongtian Peak is incomparably large, every inch of it is refined by the secret techniques of my Dragon Clan and Buddhist sect. If I and Master Body work together, and with the cooperation of all fellow Taoists, we have a 60% chance of collecting it." "Excellent." Xiao Hua clapped his hands, bowed and said, "Thank you for your trouble, fellow Taoists." Dragon Bloodline Xiao Hua and Buddha Subhuti had a careful discussion for several days. Xiao Hua and his doppelgangers listened attentively at the side. When the discussion was over, Dragon Bloodline Xiao Hua revealed his five-clawed true dragon form. The dragon crystal that had not yet been refined transformed into a scale armor and appeared outside his dragon body. Dragon Bloodline Xiao Hua roared loudly. Dragon Bloodline Xiao Hua's dragon armor emitted a dragon breath that made tens of thousands of people prostrate themselves before falling onto one end of Tongtian Peak. Dragon Bloodline Xiao Hua's dragon breath seeped out from the depths of Tongtian Peak, transforming into an inch-long dragon form that swam towards the other end of Tongtian Peak. At the other end of the broken Tongtian Peak, Buddha Subhuti held the Tree of Seven Wonders in his hand and chanted scriptures. 7 rays of light fell onto Tongtian Peak. Golden runes similarly seeped out from the light. These golden runes were like body trees that were more than an inch long, spreading towards the other end of Tongtian Peak. It took no less than 10 days for the dragon marks and body trees to completely cover the broken section of Tongtian Peak. Sure enough, it was as Dragon Vein Xiao Hua said. Within every inch of space of Tongtian Peak, the dragon marks and body trees were very abstrusely intertwined. A kind of heaven and earth truth faintly emerged from within. Alas! Xiao Hua saw this scene and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. The heavenly Tao is boundless, but I was born with a cliff rise. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua let out a dragon roar from one side of Tongtian Peak, and hundreds of millions of dragon marks rushed up along with the dragon roar. Rise. Buddha Body opened his mouth almost at the same time, chanting Buddha's name. The wonderful Tree of 7 Treasures was also lifted up as heavy as 10,000 katis, and hundreds of millions of body trees also soared into the sky along with the dragon mark. Boom! The entire earth trembled, and that huge broken Tongtian Peak actually showed signs of being lifted up. Seeing this, Xiao Hua couldn't help but be overjoyed. At the same time he released his consciousness, he shouted, "Fellow Taoists, please make your move. Rise." Green-robed Xiao Hua shouted loudly, and took out the sword gourd. Tens of thousands of spirit execution vital light flew out, and wrapped around a part of Tongtian Peak. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua also didn't show any weakness. 9 cauldrons flew out, and the 5-colored true qi also turned into a huge cauldron shape, wrapping around a part of Tongtian Peak. Phoenix Body Xiao Hua let out a long cry, and flew to the bottom of Tongtian Peak. His whole body flickered with the power of the moon and stars, and countless invisible light pillars descended from the sky, also lifting up a part of Tongtian Peak. Devil Spirit Xiao Hua landed in another place. Devil light surged around his body, and he turned into a 10,000 zhong tall devil body. That big hand firmly grasped the mountain rocks of Tongtian Peak, and countless devils roared as they lifted up Tongtian Peak. Bone tempering Xiao Hua took out the celestial white bone. The 3-headed, Six-armed celestial white bone spewed out a light pillar that covered Tongtian Peak. The 6 arms, along with the expansion of the avatar, directly lifted up the last part of Tongtian Peak with their hands. Withdraw. Seeing that the huge broken Tongtian Peak was being moved by the concerted efforts of the many clones, Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his secret technique, and his consciousness mixed with divine sense fell on Tongtian Peak. Withdraw. Sensing Xiao Hua's secret technique, the many clones urged their divine abilities at the same time. Wang. A strange howl sounded, and it seemed like the nearby space was collapsing and bursting. Along with this howl, the broken Tongtian Peak was lifted up a few inches, and that incomparably huge broken Tongtian Peak immediately and strangely disappear. Hong hong hong! Along with the disappearance of the broken Tongtian Peak, countless explosions and uncontrollable fluctuations crazily rushed out everywhere. Whether it was Dragon Vein Xiao Hua, Buddha body, or even Phoenix body Xiao Hua, their bodies flashed with indescribable brilliance as they hurriedly urged their secret techniques to suppress the divine abilities that were about to go out of control. Needless to say, Xiao Hua's face was already pale gold, and his entire body showed signs of collapsing. There were faint traces of blood between his eyebrows, and the surface of his Niwn palace was bursting with various innate divine seals. Xiao Hua's divine sense and mind were already exhausted. Xiao Hua didn't dare to say anything, and he hurriedly took some medicinal pellets to adjust his breathing. The other clones also sat cross-legged in various places and quietly cultivated. After a few months, the recovered Xiao Hua and his clones once again put the other half of the broken Tongtian Peak into the space, and then rather weakly left Tongtian Peak and flew towards the teleportation array. The teleportation array was the key for Xiao Hua to leave the Great Desolate Continent, so outside the teleportation array, there was a capital Heavenly Star Array personally set up by green-robed Xiao Hua. Seeing that the capital Heavenly Star Array hadn't suffered any damage, Xiao Hua only checked it for a moment, and then left Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua in the array, letting him use the Confucian secret technique to continue modifying the teleportation array. He took the other clones to the magma where they first encountered the stone giant. The surface of the magma was completely covered by innate heavy water, and the thick magma stones were several hundred li deep. However, it was also because of the innate heavy water's cover that an extremely fierce power was constantly brewing and roaring under the magma. Previously, when the flood was overflowing, the innate heavy water constantly seeped in, extinguishing this power bit by bit. Now, the innate heavy water no longer existed, and after the heat of the magma solidified the innate heavy water, it penetrated to the surface again. Great! Xiao Hua looked at all this, and couldn't help but clap his hands and praise, the heavenly Tao is just, and all things have their Tao. But when it's destroyed, the germination of rebirth has already been deeply implanted. This Xiao thought that although this apocalypse had disappeared, after all, the great desolate continent had been ravaged by the innate heavy water for many days, and this injury was extremely difficult to recover from. But now, it seems that things are far from what this Xiao can speculate. Perhaps in a few days, when the magma breaks through the surface, a new world will arrive. -14. Chapter 4270. More than that. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua also smiled. He raised his hand and pointed to the distance. That was not where the magma was, but after the innate heavy water corroded the hill, it seeped into the ground. But from the surface, it was mottled with rocks, completely devoid of life. However, the place Xiao Hua pointed to was the place where the innate heavy water did not seep in. There were many seeds emitting green shadows, and clusters of vigorous life force were already brewing there. Life and death, death and life. Death is the beginning of life, and at the same time, life is also the beginning of death. There is a glimmer of life in any apocalypse. The evolution of the heavenly Tao is just like this. Witnessing death and 10,000 layers of life force, Phoenix body Xiao Hua was extremely emotional, and shouted happily, even, we can also treat this apocalypse as the arrival of another golden age. Not bad, not bad. Bone-honed Xiao Hua also clapped and said, in the past, The stone giants were as simple and honest as I, and were always bullied by others. In the future, they will be the powerhouses of this great desolate continent. Hearing this, Xiao Hua unconsciously muttered to himself. Green-robed Xiao Hua understood Xiao Hua's narrow-mindedness the most. He looked at Xiao Hua with a smile that was not a smile and said, "What? Is fellow Daoist still unwilling?" Xiao Hua pinched his chin and said with a rather sinister smile, "Hehe, in I's space, even birds have to pluck a feather. The stone giants, the wood giants, and the others are hiding from a disaster here. How can I let them go so easily?" Xiao Hua was naturally not as narrow-minded as others thought. Previously, when there was only one Shenhua continent, Xiao Hua would definitely not hesitate to release these strange beasts. But now, there were many continents in his space, and that golden light was clearly corresponding to the high-level space of the upper realm. If Xiao Hua left the great desolate continent, where would he find strange beasts corresponding to the high-level space? Today, when he released these strange beasts, the space would become barren, and he was somewhat unwilling. "Fellow Daoist, why are you in a daze?" Green-robed Xiao Hua disdainfully said. His attitude was really a bit like you have white hair all over your body, and you call others a demon. He said, "You collected so many souls in the imperial palace, which one of them after reincarnation didn't become strange beast? These beasts are just a drop in the ocean compared to them." Xiao Hua's heart was moved after hearing the green-robed Xiao Hua's words. However, when he thought about it carefully, he snorted disdainfully. If the beasts that died in the Great Desolation Continent could only be reincarnated into the Great Desolation Continent, then Lord Dragon God and Metria Buddha couldn't be reincarnated into the hidden Immortal Continent and Dawn Rain Continent. "What do you know?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Even Namo Metria Buddha doesn't dare to speak about the mysteries of reincarnation. How much can you possibly know?" "How about this?" The soul cultivator Xiao Hua suggested, "Fellow Daoist, you don't have to leave all the primitive beasts here. You can leave some of them in pairs and send the rest back to the primitive continent." "Good." Xiao Hua laughed heartily, but after clapping his hands, he blinked his eyes and asked, "The stone giants don't seem to differentiate between male and female. Isn't this giving I a difficult problem?" Xiao Hua's words were naturally a joke. However, just as he was about to enter the space, boom boom. A loud sound came from afar. Xiao Hua hurriedly raised his head and saw a pillar of flame mixed with black smoke in the distant sky. Xiao Hua was shocked and hurriedly released his divine sense. However, when he saw everything clearly, his face was not shocked but happy instead. He said with a smile, "There seems to be magma gushing out from the ground in front of us. Not to mention other things, the destruction of the innate heavy water is about to be eliminated in a few dozen li of magma." Yes. The doppelgangers also said with a smile, "Let's go take a look." Xiao Hua and the others were not in a hurry. They slowly flew over and also released their divine sense to check other places along the way. Just as they saw, the area where the stone giants lived was where the magma was more active. The innate heavy water could only cover it for a while. Now, the magma everywhere had begun to erupt eagerly. Now, the magma had already erupted in places where the surface was more solid and less innate heavy water had penetrated. When Xiao Hua and the others arrived, the gushing magma had already gradually decreased. However, there was still a lot of powder that drifted to many places. When the powder landed, it covered the surface corroded by the innate heavy water. Xiao Hua's figure landed and picked up some grayish-black powder from the ground. He twirled it between his index finger and thumb a few times, then put it in front of his nose and sniffed. Although there was a pungent smell, Xiao Hua's face still revealed a smile and said, "Not bad, this thing is very useful. It won't be long before the place where it lands will become fertile soil." "Ah, this. You can even know this." The green-robed Xiao Hua was shocked and hurriedly landed. He imitated Xiao Hua and twirled some powder and sniffed it. Other than the pungent smell, he really couldn't smell anything else. "This is farming that I learned since I was young," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "How can you know?" "Since you were young? Is it here?" the green-robed Xiao Hua asked curiously. The smile on Xiao Hua's face faded a little. He raised his head and looked at the dusk sky, then looked at the still unfamiliar land. He shook his head slightly and said, "This. I don't know at this time. Hihi, if there's a chance, I want to see what kind of place you live." The green-robed Xiao Hua said with a mischievous smile, "I also want to learn how to smell this powder." Cultivate seriously. Xiao Hua nodded. "When we succeed in our divine ability, there will definitely be a chance. I believe. There will definitely be a chance." The green-robed Xiao Hua nodded firmly. His gaze seemed to pass through the sky, through the turbulence of the world, and even more so through Xiao Hua's memories. Xiao Hua originally wanted to send out the strange beasts from the space, but seeing the great changes on the surface of the great desolate continent, he wasn't in a hurry. He simply brought his clones and flew into the depths of the great desolate continent. Along the way, pillars of fire filled the sky, black smoke filled the sky, and even many places collapsed. Some mountain ranges stretched out from the ground along with the eruption of magma. Seeing that the air was so unbearable, Xiao Hua and the soul cultivator Xiao Hua activated the lightning and thunder technique again. The sky was densely covered with dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder roared. The rainstorm was born again. However, this time the rainstorm wasn't the Xiantian heavy water, but the real rain. Xiao Hua didn't use this technique of clouds and rain, but once he used it, it was beyond his control. After all, the entire great desolate continent hadn't had any rain for many years. After the Xiantian heavy water, the water-type origin energy of heaven and earth that was imprisoned by the heaven and earth pagoda's formation began to recover. The dark rain in the sky not only had a tendency to continue, but also spread towards the great desolate continent. No way. Looking at the whole world, the rain poured down, the magma roared, the mountains rose up, and the rivers formed into rivers. Xiao Hua cried out like a frightened bird, "I won't also create a world-ending disaster, right? Haha, don't worry, fellow Daoist." Phoenix body Xiao Hua laughed. "Although the water-type origin energy of heaven and earth in this world is raging, it's all under the suppression of the other origin energies of heaven and earth. The power of the stars and moon in the distance has also begun to descend." Dozens of days passed like this, and the sky began to clear up. A ray of sunlight pierced through the thick dark clouds in the sky like a giant sword. Then, all the dark clouds began to dissipate. Fierce winds suddenly rose, and a 7-colored rainbow bridge ran through the world. The whole great desolate continent seemed to have just been cleansed, and was exceptionally clean. It really was a sign of another kind of golden age coming. Fellow Daoist bone tempering, how about you go take a look at the situation underground? Xiao Hua's divine sense had already seen it, but he still didn't feel at ease, and ordered bone tempering Xiao Hua to go. Before long, bone tempering Xiao Hua returned and reported, "Fellow Daoist, there's still some magma surging under the ground, but most of it has already stabilized." "Good." Xiao Hua was overjoyed, and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoists, now we can release the strange beasts we've taken in." Then, Xiao Hua's divine sense entered the space, and according to soul cultivator Xiao Hua's suggestion, he left some of the weaker strange beasts in pairs, and released the rest. When collecting the strange beasts, all the Fortune Gate's disciples were dispatched, and it took a long time to complete. When releasing the strange beasts, there was no need to mobilize the Fortune Gate's disciples. Xiao Hua and his avatars only needed to go to various places and find a suitable place to throw these strange beasts into, and let them settle down on their own. After being educated, these strange beasts were no longer comparable to their former selves. Not to mention anything else, just the stone giants. These stone giants looked at the place that was completely different from before and the unfamiliar environment, but they didn't panic at all. Those with spiritual power used some of their magical powers to break the hard surface of the magma. Those without spiritual power started to work in the deep hole that they broke open. With the stone giants' cooperation, they soon opened a passage to the magma. With the magma, the stone giants had a home, and each of them looked for their own nest. Several months passed in this manner. When Xiao Hua sent the last batch of strange beasts into a mountain range, he finally let out a long sigh of relief and soared into the sky. When he came to a stop, as far as his eyes could see, a scene of lush greenery fell into his eyes. A continuous rain had sent enough water to the earth, and the seeds of life under the dry earth had the opportunity to grow. They couldn't bear the loneliness and poked their heads out from the earth. Not to mention, Xiao Hua had already prepared food seeds and spiritual seeds in the space. When his avatars sent out the strange beasts, they also threw these food seeds and spiritual seeds on the desolate mainland's land. Several months' time was enough for these food seeds and spiritual seeds to germinate, and also enough time for vegetation to cover the land and mountains. With green, would a colorful life be far away? 14. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.